Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. I was 45 minutes out of Cedar Grove when the call came over the air. Unit 5 Alpha, possible missing hiker. Solo male, last heard screaming. Ranger unable to locate. Request patrol unit. It was midnight. The highway was slick from earlier rain, and the yellow lines reflected in my cruiser's headlights like fractured memories. I eased off the accelerator to manage the curves and keyed my mic. 5 Alpha acknowledging, ETA 10 minutes. Fog lay heavy in the low hollows beside the road, coiling around the trees as if eager to climb inside the cruiser. The windshield wipers tapped in uneven rhythms, once, twice, then hesitated, leaving streaks that blurred the tree line. I glanced down at the dash clock. 12:17. The air in the cabin smelled faintly of stale coffee and gear oil, familiar and oddly comforting against the night's chill. As I approached the ranger station, an old wooden structure clinging to the edge of the pines, I flicked the spotlight on and off to clear the final stretch. Its paint was cracked and peeling, the porch lamp dim from years of neglect. Ranger Diaz stood beneath that lamp, shoulders hunched against a cold breeze, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. His beam swept the parking lot, then landed on me. He went in alone, he said without preamble, voice low. The light caught the fine lines around his eyes. Those late-night squints earned on a dozen futile search-and-rescue missions. He said he heard someone yelling like they were in real pain. By the time I got there, nothing but echoes. I nodded, slipping on my gloves. The latex snapped in the still air. "Show me where," I said, flicking off the spotlight so my cruiser would fade into darkness. Diaz led the way down a narrow logging trail, roots and branches underfoot slick with damp. My boots slapped the mud with a hollow thud that seemed to gather all the forest's silence into a single beat. Overhead, the trees formed a vaulted ceiling of needles and limbs, so dense the moonlight struggled through. My flashlight carved a tunnel of white through the black. "Subject's last ping was here," Diaz said, tapping the satellite coordinate on his handheld. Ahead, I could just make out a weathered fence, wood split and sagging, beyond which lay the cabin, low, squat, and unwelcoming. Windows boarded or broken, paint long rotted away. The darkness around it looked deeper, as if the cabin had exhaled all light and warmth. I took a deep breath, let my eyes adjust, and stepped forward. My heartbeat pressed against my ribs. Standard procedure said call for backup before entering any structure, especially one with signs of struggle. But with no cell service beyond point 3, that backup could be 10 or 15 minutes away, so I radioed in. Unit 5 Alpha on scene. Signs of disturbance. Will investigate. The radio crackled. Copy that. 5 Alpha. Proceed with caution. I pushed open the front door. It groaned like a wounded animal, and swept my light across the entryway. Dust motes floated in the beam, and the smell hit me. Rotten wood, damp earth, and something metallic, like old blood. My stomach clenched. The living area was deserted and trashed, chairs overturned, a coffee table smashed, dog-eared magazines strewn across the floor. I traced muddy footprints toward a hallway. My breath came out in short clouds. I whispered into my mic, though I knew none of it would transmit past these walls. Desk check. I ticked off the door numbers on the house layout in my head, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. The scream had come from upstairs, Ranger Diaz believed. I found the stairs, narrow, wooden, creaking under weight, and ascended one careful step at a time. At the top, the second-floor landing stretched out into 2 doors, one to the left, one to the right. A faint light flickered under the left door. The broken window upstairs must have allowed moonlight in, refracted by moving branches. I crept toward it, each heartbeat a footfall. I paused at the crack of the door and reached for my radio. Unit 5 Alpha. Possible subject in room. Requesting medics and backup heading northbound, no cell service. Coordinates are... I rattled off latitude and longitude. Static was all I heard. I clipped the radio back and pushed the door open. The beam landed on a man slumped against the far wall, knees drawn to his chest. He wore hiking gear, muddy boots, fleece jacket, and his pant leg was torn, skin pale and wet with sweat. His breath was ragged. In the faint flash of my light, I saw his eyes wide with terror. They flicked to mine, fear so raw it pounded in my ears. "Hey," I said softly, crouching down. "I'm Officer Reeves. You're safe now." He tried to nod, but his head lolled back. I noted the signs of shock, sweating, rapid pulse, dilated pupils. Nothing gory, thank God, but someone had definitely done damage here. He gasped out 2 words before collapse. "She's watching." My heart skipped. Who's watching? I leaned closer, careful not to startle him. He shook his head, gaze darting to the corner where shadows pooled. "Her window," he pointed. I turned my light. A single-bedroom window looked out into the black beyond. There was no one there, just the swaying branches. Yet I felt pinned by the energy of his fear. I radioed again. Subject located, conscious but incoherent. Possible hypothermia and shock. Need medics ASAP. Then I tore open the first aid kit from my belt and wrapped him in an emergency blanket, massaging his shoulders to keep him awake. Moments later, though it felt like hours, the distant wail of sirens rose above the humidity and dull thud of rain on the roof. Boots pounded up the stairs. Rangers and deputies filed in, floodlights illuminating every corner. They bundled the hiker onto a gurney and carried him out, his eyes never leaving that corner. When the cabin fell silent again, I stayed behind. My light swept the room, floorboards scarred as if from frantic scratches. On a broken dresser lay a single photograph, black and white, creased at the edges. I picked it up, 2 young women at a county fair, frozen in happier times. One wore a broad smile, the other turned away, face obscured. I slipped the photo into my pocket. Outside, the forensic team tapped and dusted, chasing a track that led under loose floorboards. They found scrawled letters carved in the wood. "I'll find you." I closed my eyes and exhaled, tasting metal on my tongue. The storm had returned outside, rain rattling the roof. As I walked down the stairs, every beam of my flashlight caught the same question. Who had been here before us, watching? And how many more calls like this would come before we figured it out? I left the cabin with a promise to myself. I'd solved this. But even as we tore the place apart, the forest swallowed the debris, and I knew it would never let go. I climbed back into the cruiser with the damp photograph still in my pocket, its corners bent from too many rifling fingers. The rain had picked up, drumming a relentless tattoo across the roof and hood, turning the narrow logging trail into a sheet of black water. I flicked the wipers back on, their rubber blades scraping unevenly, once, twice, then stuttering to a halt. Static crackled through the radio, but the storm had severed the signal again. I had no choice but to drive out the same way we'd come in, alone with my thoughts and the weight of that carved message echoing beneath the cabin floor. The Rangers fell in behind me with their high beams on full, cutting wide swaths of white through the nighttime gloom. Ranger Diaz pulled along my passenger door, rolling down his window despite the rain. "We're prepping the scene for forensics," he shouted. "They'll tow the structure in the morning, can't leave it standing." I nodded, eyes forward. In the corner of my eye, half glimpsed through the falling sheets of rain, I spotted something moving just beyond the shoulder of trees. A flash of dark shape darting between trunks, far enough that headlights couldn't reach it. "Did you see that?" I asked, but Diaz shook his head. "Nothing here," he replied, expression tense. We crested a dip in the trail, and the ranger station's windows came into view, yellowed with age and framed by glistening pines. I killed the engine and let the air go still. Mud clung to my boots as I stepped out, leaving water trails across the porch. Diaz pointed. Footprints in the shallow puddle, one set, wide and heavy, leading to the back of the building. They hadn't been there before. "Follow me," I said, drawing my flashlight. The beam sliced through the dark toward the ranger station's rear, where a narrow alley of stacked logs and rusted tools lay half buried. The wet earth held impressions, boot treads with a pattern I didn't recognize, even after 20 years on the force. They turned toward the woods, curving into shadow. I radioed dispatch, still no luck. My breath felt loud. Inhale, exhale. The forest seemed to lean closer, branches brushing like fingertips across my shoulders. I glanced over my shoulder. The station looked empty, windows dark behind rain-streaked glass. Inside, I imagined the hiker curled in a warmed bed at the hospital, safe but haunted by "she's watching." Diaz tapped my shoulder. "You want me to call it in?" I shook my head. Backup was en route from the main precinct, but until the roads reopened, we had to handle this quietly. I drew a deep breath, teeth chattering in the damp cold. Then I followed the new prints into the tree line, keeping my flashlight low to avoid blinding my night vision. They led us downhill, deeper into the forest's clutches, where the canopy sealed out moonlight entirely. My beam caught the slick sheen of a fallen log, and beyond it, a collapsed deer stand. Wood rotted through, its ladder collapsed. More footprints circled it, almost ritualistically. Whoever had left them wasn't looking to hide, they wanted someone to find their path. I swallowed down the knot in my throat. "This feels too deliberate," I murmured. Diaz grunted agreement. "A trap," he said, "but for who?" We pressed on, the woods growing denser and the air colder with every step. My radio crackled to life, static, then a voice. "Unit 5 Alpha, Deputy Lawson here. We're about 2 clicks out, stuck behind a fallen tree on Route 47. ETA 30 minutes. I switched off the radio. 30 minutes was a long time in this place. Another scream could echo through these pines and fade unanswered. I checked my watch, 1:04 a.m. Another silent minute, the world holding its breath. Then came the hum, low, mechanical, disguised by the rainfall. I swept the beam toward a narrow ravine where the terrain dropped sharply. There, half hidden by moss and vine, stood a rusted generator, its motor idling with a soft growl. Wires snaked from it down the hillside, disappearing into a thicket of underbrush. I crouched to examine it. The paint was flaking, letters nearly worn away, Fleegan Industries. My pulse kicked up. A generator this far off the grid couldn't be legal. The wires led uphill, toward a fallen tree that had been sawed through at the base. Fresh cuts, jagged and angular. Someone had dragged the tree across the trail to block access, then set up this power source for... what? My flashlight beam wandered past the generator, catching a tangled length of orange extension cord that ran back in the opposite direction, toward the cabin. I crouched again, pressing a finger to a frayed wire. It vibrated. Whoever rigged this was still here, in these woods tonight, watching. Diaz dropped beside me. His breath fogged between us. "What do you make of it?" he asked, voice low. I glared up into the darkness. "I make of it that we're not alone," I said, "and someone doesn't want us following the obvious path." He nodded, then drew his torch beam back to the ravine. "I'm going back to secure the station," he said. "You stick with me and—" He cut off as a sharp crack echoed through the trees. A shotgun report, muffled but undeniable. My heart seized. "Shotgun," I whispered. Without waiting, I sprinted toward the sound, feet slipping on wet leaves. Diaz was right behind me. We burst through low-hanging limbs into a small clearing. A twisted wire fence surrounded a makeshift platform built against an ancient oak. On it sat an old farmhouse window, intact but stolen from wherever it once stood, propped at an angle. And at the base of the oak stood a figure. Tall, lean, silhouette outlined by the generator's glow. In one hand, he held a shotgun, barrel smoking. His face was hidden by a hooded raincoat, collar pulled high. He raised the shotgun and fired again, a deafening boom that rattled my teeth. Instinct took over. I threw myself to the ground as the blast tore through the clearing, splintering wood and whipping rain backward. Diaz dove beside me, sliding into cover behind a fallen sapling. My gloves flexed on my service weapon. I leveled my aim at the platform's edge. "Freeze!" I shouted, voice raw. "Police! Drop the gun!" The hooded figure stilled, head turning toward us. In the amber light of the generator I saw Aisha's glimpse of skin, pale and taut, eyes glinting with something feral, something beyond hate. He raised the shotgun again, but paused, finger tightening around the trigger. Time slowed. Rain droplets hovered like suspended tears. My chest hammered against my ribs, each breath a knife. Behind me, Diaz advanced on one knee, pistol trained. "Now!" he commanded. For a moment, the figure stood motionless, death incarnate against the wood's dark. Then, as if deciding the game was over, he let the shotgun fall to the leaf-strewn ground with a clatter. He reached under his coat and pulled out the extension cord, still warm to the touch, and tossed it at us. I stood, kidney deep in adrenaline, and grabbed the cord. His voice was a low rasp, one word carried by the wind. "Found." Before I could respond, he turned and melted into the forest's black. The generator's hum dropped to a groan, then died. The window clattered on the platform, shards of rainlight glinting in broken glass. Diaz and I exchanged a look heavy with unspoken dread. I slapped cuffs on the shotgun's stock and radioed the precinct. Shots fired. Possible suspect fled on foot. North quadrant of logging trail. Send every available unit. The forest waited, silent as a grave. Only the rain answered us, soft, relentless, washing away footprints, erasing the cord's path, and muting the thunder of our hearts. Under that ancient oak, the platform still bore the window's frame, an invitation, a sentinel, a silent witness. And in its pain I saw my own reflection. Eyes wide, haunted by the knowledge that someone out there was always watching. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled after the figure as he melted into the underbrush, my boots sloshing through mud and rainwater. Ranger Diaz caught up on my left, torchlight dancing over dripping ferns. The shotgun lay discarded under the oak, barrels blackened with rain. I snagged it, slung it under my arm, and pressed on. No backup within earshot, just 2 officers chasing a ghost through these pines. The forest closed around us, branches lashing across rain-coated jackets. My flashlight beam stabbed ahead, revealing a muddy game trail veering uphill. The suspect must have circled back, using old logging roads I knew only from faded maps. Each step crunched underfoot. Broken twigs, decaying leaves, gravel washed down by recent storms. Behind me, Diaz panted, breath ragged. "He's toying with us," he grunted. "He knows these woods." I kept my voice low. "Get your hand on your taser if you need to," I whispered. "We can't shoot unless he aims at us again." He flicked a glance over his shoulder. "Understood, Lieutenant Reeves." The title in his voice knotted my gut. Too formal, like he was bracing for something worse than rain. We reached a clearing where the ground sloped steeply, roots protruding like ribs. Muddy tracks led upward in zigzag, then vanished into thick undergrowth. I hefted the shotgun, scanning the canopy. "He must have climbed," I murmured, "or dug in." Ahead, the beam caught a makeshift trap, a length of rope tied to a low branch, looped around a fallen log. The noose lay open, muddy. My pulse spiked. Whoever set this wanted to snare someone. Maybe me, maybe the hiker. I knelt, inspected the fibers, coarse nylon, new, likely military surplus or tactical gear. The barrel of the shotgun could fit through that loop with ease. He wanted us to walk into it. I radioed dispatch again, as if static might answer back. Silence. Behind me, Diaz clicked his tongue. "He's playing a game," he muttered. "Psychological." I nodded. "We play back, spread out 10 meters apart. Use your peripheral. I'll lead." He slipped into position on my left, and I edged up the hill, shotgun ready. Branches whipped my face, sticking to rain-bright skin. The incline steepened. Somewhere above I heard the soft gurgle of water, maybe a stream or malfunctioning pipe. My heart pounded, irregular. Adrenaline swallowed the cold. Every droplet felt like acid on my eyes. Suddenly, a low voice called out, faint but deliberate. "You shouldn't have come." I froze, shotgun raised. The voice sounded distant, tinny, as if carried through the woods by hidden speakers. "This is my domain," Diaz hissed. "He's rigged speakers." Psychological warfare. I flicked off the shotgun light and reached for my sidearm. Silent mode. We pressed higher, hugging the hillside. The trees thinned, revealing tangled wires snaking over rocks, anchored by metal stakes. They led to a battered toolbox resting on a flat granite slab. I approached cautiously, chest tight. The toolbox lid was ajar. Inside, radio parts, speaker components, wiring spools, and a crude map of the area scrawled in red marker. Circles around the cabin, the ranger station, the deer stand, and our current position. Someone had plotted our every move. My stomach churned. "He's been watching us since before the call," I said. "Studied our patterns." Diaz ran a gloved finger over the map. "He's mapped. Out escape routes, ambush points. This is professional." His whisper was edged with awe and fear. I radioed forensics, again met with static. The map slipped from my numb fingers and fluttered to the ground, sodden and unreadable. Somewhere in the shadows, something shifted. A branch snapped under weight. I spun, sidearm up, and saw him perched on a low boulder, the hooded figure shotgun in hand, the barrel aimed at my chest. My breath caught. He didn't move, but I felt his eyes through the wood. "You see me," he said, voice softer now, almost curious. "But you don't understand." Diaz edged beside me, pistol trained. "Drop it," he warned. Now. The figure cocked his head, rain dripping from the shotgun's barrel. Then, with measured calm, he set the weapon down on the boulder. He extended one hand, palms open, and held out a single, muddy glove. The other hand clutched something small and metallic. He lowered his hood, revealing a face I recognized but hadn't seen in a decade. It was Officer Mark Benton, former partner, academy brother, ex-police psychologist. His eyes were pale, hollowed by too many secrets. "I wanted you to see," he said. "I wanted you to feel it." My mind raced. Benton had been dismissed years ago for unethical profiling. His obsession with the criminal mind was legendary. But when his own methods broke department policy, they sent him packing. I'd testified against him at the board hearing. He vanished after that, resurfaced as a ranger consultant for obscure search and rescue operations. I never imagined he'd end up here. "I didn't break," he whispered, and I saw the steel behind his pale gaze. "I learned." He reached into his coat and produced a battered cassette player, obsolete by any standard, and clicked it on. From muddy speakers strapped to the rocks came the hiker's scream, echoing through the darkness just as it had that first night. The loops of terror played over and over, twisting into a low drone beneath the storm. I swallowed hard. "You tortured him," I said, voice tight as blood in a vice. "You used him." He shook his head slowly. "I saved him. I showed him fear is real." He stepped down from the rock, boots sinking into the mud. "We all need to face it." He picked up the shotgun again, handing it to me. "Here," he said, "your weapon, hold it." My fingers trembled as I took it. The cold steel bit into my palm. "Why?" I asked, voice breaking. He surveyed the forest around us, his kingdom of darkness. "Because you stopped listening," he said. "You closed your mind behind procedure and protocol. You forgot the human beneath the badge." I wanted to retort, tell him his methods were criminal, but his eyes held something true, a fractured mirror of my own complacency. That night, I'd gone through the motions: call, locate, rescue, depart. I hadn't looked beyond the next step. Benton had used fear to teach me a lesson. Diaz stepped forward, uneasy. "Let him go, Mark." "It's over." Benton turned his glare on him. Hostility flared, then softened. He exhaled, and for a moment the rain paused. "It's never over," he said. He dropped to his knees, setting the cassette player on the ground, and removed the mud-caked wires that ran like veins through the clearing. "Take it," he beckoned. "Take your fear." He pressed a finger to the device. It was rubber-banded shut. "Keep it with you." I shook my head. "You can't just..." A thunderclap rolled behind us, and when I looked back, the figure had vanished. No footprints, no sign of disturbance except the still-playing recorder. The tape loop hummed, rainwater sluicing over the speakers, distorting the hiker's scream into a haunting lullaby. Diaz grabbed my arm. "We secure this," he said, voice urgent. I knelt and snapped off the recorder, stowing it in my jacket. The tape spun down, and then silence fell. A silence so thick it pressed on my ears. I looked up to where Benton had been, nothing but swaying branches. I rose, chest tight, hands shaking. "We need to get him help," I said, but Diaz shook his head. "He doesn't need help," he replied quietly. "He's already gone." I turned off my flashlight, letting the night reclaim the clearing. The storm had eased, leaving the forest slick and silent. Somewhere, far off, dispatch must have come back online. Somebody would be calling for us soon. But as we retraced our steps down the muddy slope, I held the cassette recorder like a talisman, weighty and cold against my ribs. The hiker lay hospital-bound now, but the echo of his scream, Benton's lesson, would follow me into every shadow, every silence, every midnight shift I ever ran. And I understood, in this life, you never stop listening to fear. You never turn it off. The first pale light of dawn seeped through the slatted blinds of Evidence Room B, painting the countertop in thin bars of gray. I stared at the cassette recorder sitting atop a rubber evidence mat, its rain-slicked wires coiled like a snake around the base. The tape inside wouldn't eject. Benton had locked it in place with a rubber band. I sighed, muscles tense from hours without rest, and clipped on a fresh pair of latex gloves before lifting the recorder. Beyond these walls, the station's fluorescent lights hummed with early morning energy. Dispatchers yawning over screens, duty sergeants scrolling through overnight reports, uniforms cascading in and out of interrogation rooms. Lieutenant Harris, my relief, peeked in. "How bad?" he asked, voice low. He'd taken my shift at midnight, then tried to rest before the hiker call came through. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. I set the recorder on a workbench by the evidence locker. "Worse than we thought," I said. "Listen to this." I tapped the play button. The hiss of static filled the small room, followed by that same blood-curdling scream. The hiker's terror halfway between a human cry and an animal howl. It cycled endlessly, drowned beneath the patter of rain recorded meters from the cabin's walls. Each time the scream started, I felt it in my chest, the sting of adrenaline, the cold wash of dread. Harris winced. "Jesus," he knelt, peering through a magnifier at the recorder's housing. "Why lock it in there?" "It's a fucking message," I muttered. "He wanted us to keep it." We let the tape run a full loop, 4 minutes of anguish, then a distant dispatch call muffled beneath the scream, then silence. Harris tapped his pen on the workbench. "We have the suspect's prints on the shotgun, on the map, on every wire stake in that clearing. But until we catch Benton again, none of it matters." I rubbed my temples. The hiker, he's stable. No physical injuries beyond shock and exposure. But his narrative, he's lost half his memory. He insists someone else was there besides Benton. Something moving in the trees. Harris frowned. "You think there's another player?" I nodded slowly. I saw movement coming out of the cabin that night before the scream. It darted past the forestry lights, and the prints circling that deer stand, multiple treads. He stood and stretched. "We need hard evidence, body cam footage, ranger cameras." I shook my head. All the cabin cameras were ripped out. I checked the surveillance at the ranger station, nothing recorded. Whoever did this knew exactly where every sensor was. I tapped the recorder again. "Listen to the dispatch call overlay on the tape. It matches our frequencies. Someone piggybacked on the channel." Harris scrubbed a hand through his hair. "So, we have a former cop with bleaching white eyes, military-grade gear, psych know-how, and ghost access to our channels. Great." I turned off the recorder. "Not great," I said. "This is personal. Benton and I, we trained together at the academy. I knew his ambition. I warned the board he was crossing lines." My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. "He's proving me right." Harris nodded, uncertain. "What's next?" I slid the cassette player into an evidence bag and sealed it. "We track Benton's known associates, ex-military, search and rescue contractors, fringe paramilitary groups. We pull every last phone ping from the forest perimeter. We canvass locals along Route 47 for anyone who saw movement at night." I paused. "And I don't let this tape out of my sight." He clasped my shoulder. "I'll assemble the team." By mid-morning, 5 deputies fanned out along the logging trail, marking GPS points and measuring distances. Ranger Diaz and I led a methodical sweep of the old deer stand area, flashlight beams sweeping through a rain-freshened undergrowth. Everything had been cleaned up overnight. The generator was gone, the tripwire removed. Even the shotgun had been bagged and tagged. Only the window frame on the platform remained, its glass intact, eerily reflecting the pale sky. We dusted its edges, no usable prints. Diaz frowned at the wood's grain. He rebuilds his traps after every encounter. He's always one step ahead. I tapped on the glass. It's like he's invited us here to learn, but we can't keep answering his invitations. Diaz nodded, then gestured downstream. We found this. He held up a bent blade, a large hunting knife wedged between two boulders, engraved with the initials MB and smeared with dried mud. My heart hammered. Benton's signature. We bagged it and switched our sweep uphill toward the ranger station, following a faint trail where raindrops lingered on needles like tears. At the clearing near the station's rear, Diaz knelt by the mud prints we'd first discovered. Under close inspection, I saw two distinct patterns. One heavy, wide-soled tactical boot. Benton's signature, another smaller, treadless footprint, barely more than a child's shoe. A kid? I whispered, unease coiling up my spine. He's got an accomplice. Diaz ran a gloved finger around the prints. Or something else. We radioed the precinct. Lieutenant Reeves, you need to see this. Static crackled before dispatch confirmed receipt. Back at the station, Harris had organized the suspects list. We spread maps on the briefing table, red pins marking cabin, deer stand, generator site, and now the station rear. Each had its pattern: scream, trap, voice, invitation. The kid print was new. Harris pointed at the map. We've got two leads on possible underage accomplices. One from the psychology unit's old files, a girl Benton mentored at the youth reform program. Another from a missing person report near Farmington. Teenage boy runs away, never returned. I leaned over the table, tracing lines with my fingertip. Benton uses fear to teach. He'd recruit someone impressionable, someone hungry for approval. A thought struck me, cold as the wind rattling the windows. We need to go back to that farmhouse window, review every inch, find his fingerprints. Maybe blood residue, proof we can't ignore. Harris tapped a radio. 5 Alpha to forensics team. Get me a warrant for that window frame and anything related to the hunting knife. And start digital subpoenas on Benton's known contacts. Diaz and I exchanged a glance heavy with dread. We'd chased ghosts through these woods, but now the forest felt alive. Knowing, hungry for a new secret. Every storm drain, every bent blade, every echo on the recorder was a voice demanding to be heard. Late that afternoon, I sat alone in my office, the recorder silent on the desk. My phone buzzed. Amber's name lit the screen. My daughter, 10 years old, waiting at home for her bedtime story. I reached for the phone, thumb hovering over the answer button. My finger trembled. I thought of Benton's gloves scattered in the mud, of the kid print at the station, fragile footprints in a perilous game. I tapped the call. "Hey, kiddo," I said softly. Her muffled voice greeted me, bright and trusting. I forced a smile I was sure she couldn't see. How was school today? 10 minutes later, I disconnected. Her laughter stung my chest. Too innocent for a world that knew friends could become monsters. I set the phone down and stared at the evidence bag containing the cassette recorder. The tape sat silent, but in my head I could still hear its echo. Unit 5 Alpha. Descend to evidence room. Harris's voice crackled over the radio. We got something on that hunting knife. My boots echoed in the hallway as I walked to the lab. Inside, forensics technicians had digitized the blade's imprint and matched it. Benton's palm print, clear as day, on the handle's spine. On the hilt, a faint smear of blood. A hair was caught in the engraving. Finally, DNA that didn't belong to the hiker. I watched as the lead tech placed the blade under an ultraviolet lamp. A pattern emerged, a delicate swirl, like a child's fingerprints. The tech frowned. Either an accomplice, or he forced the kid to help clean his tools. I clenched my jaw. Whoever it is, we need to find them before Benton does. I turned away from the glow of the lamp toward the windows overlooking the parking lot. The sky had shifted to bruised purple, clouds gathering again. My radio crackled. "Reeves, Hastings from dispatch. You better get up here. Something's coming in on the channel." I strode out of the lab, clipped my mic to my chest, and keyed it. "Reeves here." Static buzzed, then a voice I hadn't heard since that cabin. "You can't hide from fear." It was low, rasping, unmistakably Benton's tone, but distorted, overlaid with faint sobbing that didn't belong to any grown man. My spine went rigid. I shut off the radio and looked at Diaz, who was peeling the evidence bag open. "He's in our channels again," I said. "He's learning us." Diaz swallowed. "He's everywhere." I stared at the silent recorder in the evidence bag, then at the darkening sky beyond the station windows. Tension coiled like a viper, ready to strike. Dawn was supposed to bring clarity, but all it offered was a new wave of dread. Because he was still out there, Benton and whoever helped him, watching every step, waiting to teach us something we didn't want to learn. And I knew the hardest lessons were never learned at dawn. The late afternoon lull had broken into a storm of activity. Dispatchers barking orders, deputies grabbing gear, and forensic techs hustling to secure every shred of evidence before nightfall. I left Ranger Diaz poring over the map pins in the briefing room and strode back to my cruiser, heart hammering. I needed the cassette recorder, the only piece of evidence that tied Benton's methods to the torrent of terror he'd unleashed. It sat sealed in an evidence locker, its rubber band still looped tight around the spool. I entered Evidence Room B, where Lieutenant Harris waited, tapping his foot. His eyes were bloodshot. "They found a lead on the missing teen, Marisol Vega," he said, voice hurried. "Cousin spotted her boarding a Greyhound 2 towns over. She's alive." Relief and dread knotted in my chest. If Marisol, just 14, had been Benton's accomplice, it meant he'd dragged a child into his twisted lessons. I retrieved the recorder and held it gingerly, as if it might bite. Harris nodded. "We've got 2 teams on Marisol, one to find her, one to bring her in safe." I exhaled. "Let's go." We piled into my cruiser, lights off, siren muted. The clouds had bled the sky dark again, rain beginning to patter like nervous fingers. Harris drove. I cradled the recorder against my chest. Each press of rain against the windshield sounded like a stutter in my nerves. "Dispatch to 5 Alpha," crackled the radio. I keyed the mic. 5 Alpha. Suspect vehicle spotted heading south on Route 47. Plate matches Benton's old rental van. I met Harris's gaze. "We're close." He pressed the accelerator. The cruiser lurched over potholes, tires hissing on wet pavement. Trees blurred past like dark sentinels. My mind raced. Marisol's face, blonde braid, terrified eyes, and Benton's pale mask of obsession. What game was he playing now? We rounded a bend near Farm Creek, where the road narrowed between moss-draped oaks. Up ahead, flashing lights broke through the curtain of rain. 2 deputies had boxed in the van against a fallen guardrail. The van's side door swung open, and a scrawny figure lurched out. Marisol. She stumbled into the headlights, hands lifted in a desperate surrender. Her raincoat was torn, muddy, and her eyes darted wildly. I jumped out of the cruiser, rain slapping my coat. Harris followed. I crouched beside Marisol, speaking softly. "Hey, it's Officer Reeves. You're safe now. Did he hurt you?" She shook her head, lips trembling. "He said I'd learn," she whispered. "He said fear makes you see the truth." I glanced at the van's open back, crates, wires, and a tangled nest of extension cords soaked by the storm. In the corner of my eye, I saw the shotgun case strapped to the floor. Someone had tried to hide him in plain sight. Harris approached the van's driver's seat, where Benton sat, hands cuffed behind his back, staring into the rain. His hair plastered to his skull, eyes vacant. Sheriff's deputies guided him toward the cruiser. He rose slowly, as if he descended from a pit of his own making. His lips curved into a small, knowing smile. I pressed the recorder against my chest. "Benton!" I shouted. He turned, head angled as if listening through the downpour. "It's over. You're coming with us." He exhaled, gaze drifting past me toward Marisol. "Look at her," he said, voice calm against the storm's roar. "She understands now." Marisol flinched and looked away. "I didn't," she began. "Shh," Benton said gently. "She learned." Then he turned back to me. "Did you listen?" I drew in a shuddering breath. "I listened." He nodded, eyes unfocused. A deputy nudged him forward. He allowed himself to be led away, coat trailing mud. Behind him, the storm splintered overhead, lightning streaking across black clouds. I knelt beside Marisol and placed my hand on her shoulder. "You're safe," I repeated. "We're taking you home." She stared at the rain-slicked road, expression hollow. He said I'd hear it forever. My heart clenched. "Hear what?" She shook her head. "The tape, his voice, my cries, on loop. He said I'd never escape it." Tears mingled with raindrops on her cheeks. I pressed the recorder's play button despite the rain, switch thrown free. Static spat, then a low hum of tape being sucked forward. Marisol's terrified cry rose, overlapped by Benton's whispered lesson. "Fear is the only truth you can't deny." Lightning framed the clearing, illuminating her wide eyes. "Turn it off," she pleaded. My finger hovered over the stop button. Every fiber of my being screamed to shatter the device, to silence the echo of torture. But I held fast. "One more thing," I said to Benton's recording, voice steady despite the tremor inside me. "One more lesson." I flicked the tape to its end. Then I pressed eject. The tape popped free, flopped wet and limp into my palm. I held it out to Marisol. "You take this," I said softly. "Keep it, then destroy it when you're ready." Her small fingers closed around it, clutching it like a lifeline. She rose unsteadily and staggered to Harris's cruiser where a deputy waited with a blanket. She tucked the tape into her jacket pocket. I watched her go, coat swirling, recorder in hand. The howling storm swallowed her figure until she vanished beneath the guardrail lights. I turned back to the hopper where Benton's van sat crushed against the guardrail, front end buckled, engine smoldering. He stood beside it, shoulders slumped in resignation. I approached him, boots sinking into mud. "Why?" I asked. Rainwater sluiced down my face, indistinguishable from tears. He looked up, eyes pale as bone. "To teach you the hardest lesson," he said. "Fear never goes away." I slid my cuffs tighter. "It goes away when you stop listening." He tilted his head, studying me. "You'll never stop." I stepped back as the deputies guided him into the cruiser. The storm's final roar shook the trees. I felt that same hush afterward, as if the world exhaled an awful secret. I retrieved Marisol's file from my coat pocket, page after page of therapy notes, her childhood fears, the nightmares Benton exploited. I tore them out and dropped them into the mud. Rain swept them away in a swirl of pages, ink smearing into the earth. Finally, I pocketed the recorder, the last tether to Benton's twisted pedagogy. Harris appeared, flashlight beam dancing over the wreck. "You okay?" he asked, voice gentle. I nodded against the wind. "Yeah." He gestured toward the cruiser. "Let's get Marisol to safety, then we process Benton." I climbed into the cruiser and started the engine. The storm had spent itself, leaving the sky a bruised gray. As Harris drove off, the forest fell silent again. No footprints, no echoes, no cord trails. I held the recorder on my lap, thumb hovering over the play button. I thought of Marisol's tear-streaked face, Benton's haunted grin, and the hiker's scream that had started it all. I flicked the tape on one more time. The night shift began like any other. Me and Martinez rolling out at 2200 hours in the Crown Victoria. Lights off, siren silent, dashboard clock glowing 22:03. I flipped on the scanner. Low chatter, nothing urgent, until dispatch's voice crackled over the air. Unit 42, 512 Pinecrest Drive. Neighbors report loud banging around back door. Welfare check requested. On Ellie Secas, Martinez rubbed his eyes. "Another noise complaint," he muttered, voice thick with sleep. I nodded, eased the cruiser onto Pinecrest. The street was a lattice of dark houses, porches empty and silent beneath swaying oaks. A thin rain had begun, each drop tapping on the windshield like the first notes of a dirge. We pulled up behind an old Caprice, headlights off. The front porch light of 512 flickered, once, twice, then died. I killed the engine, and our world shrank to the hiss of tires settling on wet asphalt, the thrum of the Crown Vic cooling down, and dispatch's faint static. "Anything in Canadian dollars?" I asked, reaching for the mic. "Jackson, Robert," Martinez replied, scrolling through his tablet. "Tenants moved in 1992. Single occupant, mid-50s. No calls for service in 30 years, other than a noise complaint 2 years ago. Jackson lived alone. No prior mental health dispatches, no domestic violence. Just one noise complaint about loud music at 3 a.m. Last record was a burglary call in 99. He reported missing tools but never followed up. I clipped on my vest, loaded extra rounds. "All right," I said. "Let's do a quick circle check, then hit back door, pace it out." We approached on foot, rain soaking our jackets. The walkway was littered with fallen leaves and a broken garden gnome. The siding was peeling, window blinds warped by age. I tapped the doorbell, no chime, dead circuit. I knocked sharply, knuckles echoing. "San Diego PD," I called. "Officer Reed, welfare check." Silence. Only the drip of rain off the eaves. I motioned to Martinez. He kicked a gentle blow to the door. It didn't budge. I tried the knob, locked. "We'll need to go through the back," I said. He nodded. We circled the house. At the back, a narrow porch gave onto a boarded-up door. Plywood nailed in a haphazard X1 board had split, revealing a gap just big enough to peer through. Inside, in the dim glow of a single bulb, I spotted something peculiar. An old reel-to-reel tape deck, still spinning, its wheels catching dust, playing a warped melody, like a calliope stuck between carnival songs. "Check that out," I whispered. Martinez peered through the gap. Reels moving, but no audio. Weird. I knelt, slipped off my glove, and pressed my ear to the wood. The reel whirred, but nothing came through, just a low buzz. I felt the hair on my neck stand up. I lifted the board an inch, Static crackled inside. "Jackson?" I called, louder this time. "You okay in there?" Still nothing. The tape deck clicked off, slow and deliberate. My heart thudded. I exchanged a look with Martinez. His eyes were wide, reflecting the restless reel's spindle. "Let's get entry," I said. He drew his baton. I readied mine. 3 strikes to the center. Wood splintered. The board fell away. Rain sprayed inside. I raised my flashlight. The beam danced across a hallway strewn with shoes and discarded paper. The faint glow of the tape deck's LED blinked, then died. "Clear left," I announced, sweeping to my side. Footsteps echoed behind me. Martinez. We advanced, room by room. A living area. Sofa overturned. Whiskey bottles on a low table. A cracked TV screen showing nothing but static. Next, a narrow kitchen. Sink piled with mold-dark dishes. A calendar on the wall stuck on March 1998. At the end of the hallway stood a closed door, light seeping from beneath it. I drew my Glock, pressed against the frame. "PD," I said. "Open up." Silence. "Martinez," I whispered. He nodded. I braced. He swung the door open. I flashed my light inside. Jackson sat in an old office chair facing the wall. He wore a rumpled shirt and suspenders. His salt and pepper hair was unkempt. The reel deck lay on the floor behind him, lights off. The blank drywall in front of him was immaculate. No marks, no nails, just new plaster. I cleared my throat. "Mr. Jackson." He turned slowly. His eyes, red-rimmed, glassy, locked onto mine. He didn't rise. He just stared, mouth parted. "It's Officer Reed. Are you all right?" He swallowed hard, voice cracking. "They told me you'd come," he said. "I've been waiting." Who are you waiting for?" His gaze drifted to the wall. "She's right there," he whispered. "My Lori." I glanced at the blank wall. "We don't see anyone, sir." He rocked forward, voice rising. "She plays here in the dark. She sings." He mimed, turning a knob. "That tape, it's her song." My stomach nodded. I radioed dispatch. "Unit 42, Code 4 on Jackson. Need med and transport request for mental evaluation." Jackson leapt forward, chair tipping. "No!" he screamed, stumbling toward the wall. He reached out, fingertips brushing empty air. "She's gone." Martinez moved to secure him, but Jackson pushed past, charging down the hallway. I caught him by the arm. His strength was feeble, but he twisted free, knocking me into the frame. Pain flashed in my shoulder. I steadied myself, radio under my fingers. "Officer down," I muttered, but my voice was steady. I drew a breath, then reached out again for Jackson. He wasn't resisting now. He just collapsed at my feet, sobbing. I cuffed him gently, laid him on his side. His tears fell onto the beige carpet. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I wanted to show her to you." The flashlight's beam flickered. The reel deck behind him hummed back to life. A single note, drowned in static, crackled from its speaker. I stood, heart hammering. I glanced at the wall, still blank. The note repeated, then faded. The house was silent again, save for my own breathing. I called for EMS. As Martinez guided Jackson out, I scooped up the reel. Cold metal, the label worn. Lori, March 12, 1998. Outside, the rain had eased to a drizzle. Patrol cars arrived, red and blue lights reflecting off wet asphalt. I handed the reel to the evidence tech, voice hollow. "Play it," I said. Later, in the station, we ran the tape. Nothing but static, an endless gray hiss. No melody, no voice, just static. I filed my report at dawn, exhaustion pressing at my eyelids. They called it a welfare check gone wrong. PTSD, grief hallucinations. Jackson's daughter never existed in any database. But in the quiet of my home that morning, I sat with the reel in my hand, heart still thudding. I traced the scuffs on its edge and whispered into the silence, I saw her too. And even now, when the scanner goes silent, I swear I hear a faint carnival tune playing just beyond the static, beckoning me back to 512 Pinecrest Drive. I didn't sleep. My eyes stayed open long after dawn, light seeped through the curtains, sharper than any siren. Every time I closed them, I saw that empty wall in Jackson's house, the way it gleamed under the single bulb, the way his daughter's name was scrawled in my mind. The reel sat on the nightstand beside my Glock and my badge, 3 objects I never imagined sharing the same shelf. I tried to read the station email, but the words blurred. The precinct's evidence locker held that tape now. I'd signed chain of custody twice. I couldn't explain why I needed it back. In uniform, I felt the weight of my duty. Reports, statements, spin for the media, assurances to command that things were under control. But under the fabric of my vest, pressing against my chest, was a dull ache that felt more real than the stab scar that only hardened into a faint line months ago. Late morning, I called a favor from the desk sergeant and asked to retrieve my personal effects from the evidence room. Officially, I needed my vest's recording pen and the extra magazine I'd left behind. Unofficially, I wanted to hold that reel again, to feel its grooves between my fingers. I told myself I'd return it immediately, but I stalled in the hallway, heart pounding, as I watched officers hurry to break room coffee runs, civilians come in for fingerprinting, detective pairs clustered over murder boards. Nobody here knew what I knew, and that thought hollowed me out. In the evidence locker, I logged in, opened the metal door, and there it was. Item 42-0377. Reel-to-reel tape. Lorry 31298. Finger cuffs clicked on my right wrist as I took it out. I flicked on my phone's flashlight, ran my thumbnail along the label. Indentations from years of handling. It felt warm. I turned it over. The other side was blank. No note, no shield number, just a brittle piece of plastic and metal that claimed to contain only static. Security camera light blinked overhead. I tucked the tape in my pocket alongside the recording pen and extra mag. The sergeant gave me a nod. "You okay, Reed?" I plastered on a polite smile. "Just routine," I said. But my voice cracked. He nodded and let me pass. Back at home, I set up a small desk in the corner of my bedroom. I had an old reel player stored away from my college days, something I'd used for family recordings of my daughter when she was little. I dusted it off, plugged it in, and snapped the reels into place. The moment my fingers touched the metal spindle, my pulse leapt. Martinez's voice echoed in my skull. I saw her too. This was my private confession at 11:16 a.m. No radio, no partner, no backup, just me in that silent house. I pressed play, the deck whirred, and at first nothing but soft static. Then a breath, so human it was unmistakable. I froze, earpiece against my ear. A child's laughter, half hidden behind the buzz, a fleeting fragile trill, like glass wind chimes caught in a half-forgotten breeze. I nearly dropped the tape, sweat pricked my collar. The laughter rose, then dipped, twisted. A second later, it vanished, replaced by pure static again. I hit stop, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. There was no carnival melody, only that laugh once. Questions piled on my chest, heavier than full moon tides. Jackson's daughter had no record, no missing person report, no obituary, no genealogy. Did he invent her from grief? Could my mind be bending around trauma, filling the reel with my own hopes of something beyond control? But that laughter, it sounded so alive. Not at all like my imagination. I grabbed my phone and shot a shaky video of the deck's blinking lights. I texted Martinez, "Bring your rig. Urgent." He arrived 2 hours later, morning sun turning to afternoon. His cruiser rolled up in front of my house, lights off, like we were back on Pinecrest Drive waiting to breach. He climbed out, hooded eyes concerned. "What's going on?" he asked, voice low. I led him inside. "Watch." I pressed play. The static hiss, then the laughter. His jaw clenched. He held up his phone. "That's real." We sat in silence as it repeated twice more before cutting. He rubbed his face. "Reed, man, maybe you should hand it over, let the techs run it again." I shook my head. They found nothing. But I know what I heard. His gaze moved to the corner of the room, where I'd drawn a crude floor plan of Jackson's house. Markings for each room, the tape deck position, the angle from the crack in the plywood, like a detective's murder map. Beneath it, I'd scribbled, "She plays here?" Martinez ran his finger along the line. "Emily," he said quietly. "Your daughter's name was Emily." I closed my eyes, chest tightening. I never told him. "You remembered?" He nodded. "You played me that recording from your home video last year. Halloween, remember?" She laughed through the static when you were watching the old home movies. His voice trailed. "It's therapy material. Memories get stuck on that tape." My throat tightened. I looked back at the reel. Lori. My subconscious had changed the name, blended my grief and Jackson's. Lori wasn't real. Jackson's daughter didn't exist. And somehow, Emily's laughter slipped into the tape because every night I'd pressed play to hear my little girl's voice again. This tape was a mirror. Grief reflected into everything I did. I slammed the stop button. The deck hissed its final static. I leaned back. Sunlight drifted through the curtains. The house was quiet. My phone buzzed, dispatch requesting follow-up on Jackson's mental evaluation, detective's office pushing for final report. I stood slowly. "I need to go back," I said. Martinez stared, "Back to 512. He sighed. "Reed, it's civil now. You can't—" "I have to," I interrupted. "I need to see the wall. I need to face it." He nodded, respect and worry in his eyes. "Let's gear up." By 1645, we were pulling onto Pinecrest again. The sun was lowering, turning the street amber. Neighbors in their yards glanced up as we passed. At 512, the house looked the same as that first night. Worn siding, empty porch. But the boarded door at the back had been replaced. Solid wood now, unmarked. The new board bore no gap, no reel. I cut the engine, drew my radio. Unit 42 on scene, requesting Code 4 entry for welfare retest. I motioned to Martinez. We approached on foot, lights off, sidearms holstered but ready. Our badges glinted faintly in the dying light. I knocked on the front door. "San Diego PD, Officer Reed." No answer. Martinez played backup. We circled. No windows in back, plywood under new locks. I examined the wood. Fresh paint, screws flush. No gaps to peek through. I produced my keys. Civil code granted us access. Chief's office authorized re-entry for inspection. The deadbolt clicked. I pushed the door. It swung open on silent hinges. Inside, everything was gone. No sofa, no tape deck, no gnomes. The rooms were empty shells. Dust coating every surface. Even the calendar was gone. The drywall was intact, unblemished. I scanned the living room, then the hallway. My boots whispered on bare floorboards. I reached the room where Jackson had sat. The door was closed. I tried the knob, locked. I hesitated, heart hammering. Here it was again, the unknown threshold. I turned the knob, unlocked. The door swung inward. A single bulb overhead sputtered to life, casting a weak glow on bare plaster. No chair, no desk, no tape player, only me and Martinez. He stepped inside, hands raised. Nothing here. I walked forward, boots echoing. I pressed my palm to the blank wall, smooth and cold. I closed my eyes, my heart felt like a trapped animal. I whispered, "I'm here." The air turned colder. A faint hum, so soft I thought I imagined it, rose from the floorboards. I felt breath on my neck. I spun, beam of flashlight stabbing the dark. Martinez was beside me, face pale. We both heard it. A child's laughter, distant, echoing through the empty house as if the walls themselves remembered. I dropped to my knees, torn between fear and longing. "Emily?" I muttered. The laughter faded into static, then silence. My radio crackled. "Unit 42, are you all right?" It was dispatch. I stood, voice hollow. "Just fine." Behind me, the wall remained unreadable, but in my mind it was etched forever. And I knew, as we stepped out into the twilight, that no amount of evidence, no clinical reports, no unspoken truths would ever close that door, or silence the laughter that still played on the other side. The laughter's echo still rang in my ears as we stumbled back into the hallway. Martinez and I stood shoulder to shoulder beneath that failing bulb, bodies tense, breaths uneven. The house was empty, stripped bare, and yet every corner seemed primed with hidden weight. My heart pounded, each beat a drum in the hush. "Reed," Martinez murmured, voice low enough that even the walls wouldn't hear. "What now?" I swallowed. The temperature felt wrong, too cold, as if the rooms had bled warmth off the air. My uniform jacket stuck to my shoulders, damp with sweat. "We check upstairs," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "If something's gone, maybe that's where it moved." He nodded, flashlight trained on the stairs. Each step creaked beneath my weight, wooden slats groaning like tired bones. The banister rail was slick with condensation. I gripped it and climbed, footsteps echoing twice before the sound died. At the top landing, a dim hallway stretched left and right. Doors on either side, all closed. Flickering overhead, one recessed fixture flickered, then steadied into a weak halo of light. I moved to the first door on the right. The brass knob was cold under my glove. "Dispatch, this is Unit 42, I whispered into the radio's lapel. My voice sounded distant, as if replayed off the old plaster. "We have full interior clear, no signs of occupant." I bit my lip. Still investigating possible hiding spots. Silence from dispatch. I clicked off. The radio stuttered back to life with background chatter, other calls, routine noise, but those voices felt alien now. My attention snapped to the door. I tried the knob, locked. I glanced at Martinez. He raised an eyebrow. "We can go knock it down." I shook my head. "Try talking." I tapped the door. "Jackson, it's Officer Reed. If you're here, we need to talk." No answer. I pressed my ear to the wood. No rustles, no sighs. Just the low hum of electricity through the fixtures. I opened the door slowly. Inside, a bedroom. Walls painted a pale blue, now dulled by grime. A single window faced the street. Blinds were drawn tight, but daylight filtered through the slats in thin bars. The floor was bare, save for a thin layer of dust and a toppled nightstand. A framed photograph lay face down. I kicked gently. It spun onto its front. A smiling little girl, dark hair and pigtails, arms outstretched toward the camera. No inscription, just a faded date. March 12th, 1998. My breath hitched. I knelt, fingertips brushing the glass. Her face, smiling and alive, was too familiar. Emily's laughter whispered at the back of my mind, nudging me into guilt. I placed the photo back and stood. Martinez shone his light at the closet door. "Check it," I said. He cracked the door. Inside, empty hangers clinked, dust motes swirling in the beam. No tracks on the powdered carpet. I drew my sidearm, a reflex deeper than thought, and swept the closet with slow arcs, heart slamming. Nothing. We exited. I closed the door gently behind us. The hallway lights flickered, and for a heartbeat I glimpsed a small shadow darting at the far end, between two closed doors. I jerked the beam, saw nothing. "We're not alone," Martinez said quietly. My jaw clenched. "Go left." We advanced down the hall. The next door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside, a nursery, sparse, as though emptied in haste. Pink wallpaper peeled from the corners. A faded mobile hung from the ceiling, its painted animals missing limbs. The crib was gone, but its mattress lay on the floor, stained. I moved closer, fabric frayed, a child's blanket embroidered with "Lori" in cursive. My hand trembled. I turned to Martinez. She was real for him. I took the blanket, held it up. The word "Lori" curled along the edge in pastel thread. I inhaled the musty scent, fabric steeped in memory. I clenched it and dropped it back. "Don't touch anything else," I warned. Across the room, the mobile jerked, slowly, turning a single horse charm toward us. No breeze, silence. I felt a pressure in my chest, grief, dread, compassion tangled together. Jackson's daughter never existed, yet here was proof he had believed her so fiercely. We backed out of the nursery. I paused at the threshold. My mouth dry, I swallowed. "One more room," I said. He didn't respond, but his light bobbed toward the last door at the end of the hall. I followed. The knob resisted, as though held from the inside. I released it. It clicked. We entered together. This room was unfamiliar. A study lined with built-in shelves, all emptied. A desk sat at center, drawer open, empty. Above it, a bulletin board of cork. Pinned in neat rows were photographs of missing person flyers, faces of children from every era, yellowed clippings from newspapers, blue-inked printouts of online missing lists. In the center, a single flyer stood out, an image of a little girl, a child with dark pigtails, face half obscured by glare. Underneath, handwritten in sharp print, "My Lori." I stepped forward. Each flyer around it was neatly crossed out except this one. The board trembled. I caught the edge. Martinez hovered behind me, hand on my shoulder. The hush was alive with unsaid things. I reached toward the board. My fingers hovered over the pushpin, but my mind reeled. We had seen too much. Evidence that Jackson's grief had metastasized into obsession. This had been a shrine, a place where he had tried to piece together proof of a daughter lost, real or imagined. My radio crackled. I snapped upright, eyes wide. "Go silent," I hissed. But the static faded into a low hum, like that tape reel, spinning forever. The bare boards around us felt like they could crack, unleash something unfathomable. I turned to Martinez. "We need to get out." He nodded. I stepped back, but my boot caught the fallen blanket, a ghost of pink. I kicked it aside. The room lurched. The charm on the mobile downstairs tinkled in my memory. I led the way out, heart hammering, mind racing. Each door we passed sealed itself in my vision. The nursery, the bedroom, Jackson's office. I heard that replayed laughter, soft as a breeze, tethered to my soul. At the top of the stairs I turned once more, shining my flashlight into the study. The bulletin board gleamed, pushpins shimmering in the beam. I saw Lori's flyer flip, as though nudged by a breathless finger. I jerked away. Down the stairs we ran, two shadows slipping through empty frames. The front door yawned open before me. I burst through. Cold night air hit my face, brisk and alive. I staggered onto the porch. Martinez followed. The door slammed shut behind him. No wind, no hand. My chest heaved. I looked back through the glass pane. The hall was dark, featureless. No nursery, no study, no tape deck. Only the black shell of a house. I collapsed onto the wet steps, rain beginning to fall again. Martinez knelt beside me. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't. I stared at the porch light, steady yellow, innocuous. In its glow, I glimpsed a small shape on the stoop. The blanket, pink thread glinting, spelling Lori. Martinez didn't see it. I picked it up and folded it into my jacket. "Let's go," I whispered. He helped me to my feet. We walked to the cruiser without another word. The engine turned over. Headlights cut into the dark. We drove away, leaving 512 Pinecrest behind, an empty shell concealing every truth we'd uncovered. But I carried Lori's blanket against my chest, and I knew the house held more than empty walls. It held echoes, and I would return for them no matter how deep the darkness ran. The road back to the station was a blur of street lamps and passing headlights. I sat in the passenger seat, the pink blanket folded neatly on my lap, its threadbare softness a stark contrast to the hard leather beneath. Martinez drove in silence, the hum of the engine our only companion. Every so often, I'd reach into my jacket, brush a fingertip against the embroidered name, Lori, and feel a pang of guilt so sharp I thought I might collapse. By the time we pulled into the precinct parking lot, the sky had bled into deep indigo. I unbuckled, sliding out of the cruiser with the blanket cradled like a wounded animal. Inside, the fluorescent lights felt harsh, the air thick with coffee steam and low chatter. Officers glanced up as I passed. I nodded at each, tone clipped. "I'm heading to evidence," I muttered, almost to myself. Martinez followed. In the locker room, we changed into plain clothes, me swapping my jacket for a loose polo, him shrugging out of his gear. We both wore gloves when we handled the runner boxes. There was no official paperwork to retrieve the blanket. I'd slipped it inside an unmarked envelope in my locker. Tonight, the precinct felt too small, too public. I needed space. "Let's go to my place," I said. "We'll figure it out there." He nodded, knowing better than to press. We stepped outside into a crisp breeze, the station's neon sign flickering overhead. I led us back to the cruiser, eyes darting at every shadow. The blanket's name glowed in my peripheral vision, Lori. At home, the front door opened on its usual creak. I flicked on a single lamp in the living room, the soft pool of light settling over a small folding table I'd set up by the window. Martinez placed the reel player beside it. I shut the door, double-locked, and clicked off the overhead light. The lamp cast long, trembling shadows across the floor. I took a deep breath. First, I need to understand why Jackson's obsession latched onto my daughter's voice, why Emily became Lori on that reel. I lifted the tape, fingers trembling, and placed it on the spindle. Martinez stood behind me, arms crossed but silent. The hum of the machine spun to life, and the blanket slipped from my jacket onto the table's edge, its pink corner hanging like an eyelash. Static hissed, then laughter, soft, echoing, unmistakably a child. I closed my eyes, trying to pinpoint its source. It wasn't Jackson's daughter, not on record. It was Emily, my Emily. My throat closed. I reached for the plug and yanked it out. The machine stuttered to a halt, the laughter cut off mid-phrase, leaving only a dying echo. My chest heaved. I pressed my palms to the table, knuckles white. Every night I played that reel to hear her voice, thinking I'd saved something real. My voice cracked. Martinez laid a hand on my shoulder. "You weren't just reliving your own memories," he said gently. "You were feeding Jackson's grief. He heard your daughter, not because she was there, but because you carried her everywhere." Warm guilt washed over me. I looked down at the blanket, at the name stitched in pastel thread. "I gave him Emily," I whispered. "He borrowed my grief." Martinez nodded. "He needed something to anchor his loss, and because you believed in that tape, it became part of his reality." I stood, pacing the small living room. The lamp illuminated dust motes dancing in the air. Every corner felt alive with memories of Emily's giggles, her small feet pattering on hardwood floors, her face lit by birthday candles. Memories I'd tucked away, considered mine alone. Now they had spilled into Jackson's world, morphed into Lori, and haunted a house at 512 Pinecrest. My phone buzzed, a message from dispatch. "Please submit final write-up on Jackson case by 0800. I tapped it away. "I can't close this," I said. "Not yet." Martinez watched me, concern etched on his face. "We need to go back, together." He didn't say again, but it was implied. We'd faced the house once, twice, in daylight and darkness. Still, I felt its pull, a gravity rooted in loss and longing. I retrieved a pen and a worn notebook from my desk drawer. On the first page, I sketched the front elevation of the house. The boarded door, the broken gnome, the crooked porch railing. I flipped to a blank sheet and began mapping the tape's journey, how it traveled from Jackson's deck into my home, from my memories into his shrine. Beneath the diagram, I wrote, "Thread of grief runs both ways. We are the tapes we spin." Midnight came again. The reel player sat unplugged, the blanket folded beside it. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the window. The neighborhood was quiet. No carnival tunes, no laughter, no banging at the back door. But in the hush, I heard it. A single, distant giggle, like a child playing just beyond my line of sight. Or was it my heart, echoing memories from years past? I closed my eyes and listened. The breeze rustled the leaves outside, carrying a whisper I felt more than heard. A soft, tremulous note that might have been laughter, might have been the sigh of the night itself. My hand moved to the blanket in my lap. I traced the letters, Lori. I whispered the name aloud, Lori, then another name, Emily. The house was silent. The reel lay dormant. But I knew neither loss nor memory ever truly sleeps. They spin on, beneath the surface, waiting to be played again. And in that realization I felt the full weight of why I couldn't walk away. I looked at Martinez. "Tomorrow," I said, voice low, "we go back to Pinecrest, one last time. We close that tape deck for good." He nodded, and as I folded the blanket around my shoulders, I felt Emily's laughter ripple through me. No longer just mine, no longer just Jackson's, but something in between. A fragile echo of love and loss that would never fade. Dawn's pale light hadn't yet crept through the blinds when Martinez and I pulled up to 512 Pinecrest for the third time. My eyes stung from sleepless nights and the weight of the blanket draped over my jacket like a talisman. I kept my gaze fixed on the house as we stepped out, the air crisp with early morning chill. Not a soul was stirring on the street, curtains drawn tight, porches empty. It felt as though the neighborhood itself was holding its breath, waiting. I locked the cruiser's doors and checked my weapon. Not for threats of violence, but for the reassurance of routine protocol. Martinez mirrored my motions. Behind us, the silent sky was streaked with pale blue, promising a clear day. yet my chest felt heavy as if the attic of my soul had been closed long ago and someone was hammering from the inside. We approached the front porch. The boards had settled in the night. No gnarled wood, no broken gnome. Everything had been cleared away, like someone wanted the house to look less lived in, more anonymous. I knocked firmly on the front door. No answer. I tested the knob, locked. I radioed, Unit 42, Code 4, front entry locked. Dispatch's voice crackled softly. Copy, proceed with method of entry. I glanced at Martinez. He unslung his baton. I prepped mine. 3 rhythmic strikes shattered the wooden panel. Splinters sprayed. We eased inside, the acrid scent of old plaster greeting us. The foyer was empty, clean, sterile. I lifted my flashlight's beam over walls scrubbed of years of grime, as though someone had painted over every memory. I advanced slowly, each footstep echoing off the bare floors. Check left, I instructed. Martinez swept into the living area. I moved to the hallway that led back to the rooms we'd explored. Rooms full of relics once, now hollow. The real deck was gone, the blanket's corner absent from the corner where I'd first peered through the plywood. Even the floor plan I'd drawn in the dust was erased, replaced by fresh, smooth hardwood. We reached the door at the hall's end, the one I'd turned the knob on that first night. It was closed, with a modern lock. No sign of warped plywood. I pressed my ear to it, expecting static or laughter, but heard only the faint hum of distant traffic. My heart began to race, an echo of what I felt outside the tape player's hiss. I raised my flashlight, braced my shoulder, and pushed. The door swung open on silent hinges. I stepped inside, Martinez behind me. The bulb overhead crackled to life, illuminating an empty study, white walls, a built-in desk smeared of fingerprints, shelves stripped of flyers. No bulletin board, no missing person clippings. It was as though the entire shrine Jackson had crafted and that I'd excavated had never existed. I paused in the center of the room, breathing shallow. "It's all gone," I whispered. Martinez scanned the perimeter. "Cleared," he replied. "Nothing to process." I wanted to believe it was over, that Jackson's visions had been purged, that my own projections had faded, that grief could finally rest. But emptiness in a place once brimming with loss felt worse than any haunting. It meant the story hadn't been closed. It had been erased, leaving no trace for understanding. I moved to the window and patted aside the blind slats. The street beyond was waking. A mail carrier pushing her cart, a jogger's silhouette on the sidewalk. Morning routines resumed, but here, in this room, something important had vanished. I felt a hollow in my chest, like a wound reopened. I turned back to the study. My reflection in the desk's glass surface looked gaunt and uncertain. The pink blanket, heavy in my pocket, was my only remaining link. I pulled it free. It drifted through the beam of my flashlight, its pastel thread catching the light. Lori. I folded it once, twice, and held it over my heart. I closed my eyes, listening for the faint stir of static. Silence answered. I exhaled. "We should go," Martinez said softly. His tone was gentle, compassion for a partner who'd carried too much. I nodded and slipped the blanket back into my jacket. As I moved to the door, I paused, hand on the frame. I swallowed, voice low. One last look. I aimed the beam at the far corner, expecting to find a tape deck relic or a pinned flyer, but instead saw only shadows pooling against the baseboards. My shoulders sagged. I glanced at Martinez. He offered a small, sad nod. Together, we exited. The door closed behind us with a soft click. No slam, no echo. I watched the house shrink in the distance as we walked to the cruiser. My boots sounded hollow on the pavement. Once inside, I locked the doors and sat for a moment, blanket folded on the passenger seat. I stared at it, the name Lori stitched along the edge, wondering if Jackson had ever believed that name belonged to a real child, or if it was always a placeholder for grief he could never name. I started the engine. The dash clock glowed 6:57. The precinct would wake soon. I shifted into drive and pulled away, letting the house slip behind me. As the streetlights faded in the rearview mirror, I felt the faintest tremor in my spine, the ghost of a static tremolo, a child's breath, a lullaby half heard. I gripped the blanket tighter, heart pounding. Everywhere I go, I carry the weight of my loss and Jackson's, woven into that single reel, spun into the blank walls of an empty house, and stitched into a threadbare blanket. I thought I could close the door, lock the story away, but grief doesn't follow protocols. It follows you home. And sometimes, in the hollow hush of dawn, you still hear her laughter, soft as a promise, faint as static on tape, echoing long after the room has gone dark. I was 12 hours into my shift, rain-soaked and bone-weary, when dispatch cut through the static. Unit 47, 1023 at 48202 Pine Ridge Road. Welfare check requested. Caller reports screaming inside, then silence. Neighbors saw lights flicker. I clicked the mic off and stared through the windshield as droplets ran in rivulets across the glass. Pine Ridge was a tangle of narrow lanes and shuttered porches, a place where you could go a lifetime without seeing a soul beyond the half-dozen strobe-lit houses at the end of the cul-de-sac. My partner, Diaz, exhaled beside me. "Sounds routine," he muttered, voice thick with fatigue. He'd been driving since dawn. His shoulders slumped against the door. Probably just a loose board or a kid messing around. He turned his headlamp off. Darkness pressed in behind us. I killed the cruiser's engine and stepped into ankle-deep puddles that glowed in the streetlight. The air smelled of wet asphalt and something sharper, like burnt wiring. Diaz followed, flashlight in hand, beam slicing through the mist. Our boots clacked on the pavement as we approached the narrow walkway to the front porch. The house's pale vinyl siding was streaked with grime. The door's knob loose in its frame. I tugged the door. It creaked. No lock. Inside, the floorboards moaned under our weight. I clicked on my flashlight and swept its beam across the foyer. A fail-to-light bulb hanging by its cord. A half-empty whiskey bottle on a soaked welcome mat. The wallpaper, once floral, was now mottled and peeling. A single, blood-red handprint marked the wall by the stairs. Diaz froze. "You see that?" I nodded, heart thudding. "We're clear on procedure. I'm going up. You cover the rear exit." He swallowed. "Copy that." My boots whispered against the wood as I climbed. 2 flights up, I moved room to room. Bedroom, bathroom. Spare that had become a dumping ground for soggy clothes and broken toys. All empty, no movement, no sound but my own breath. At the end of the hall was the living area, a single lamp casting a sickly circle of light on a threadbare rug. A coffee table lay overturned, shards of glass from a broken photo frame littered the floor. The image within was torn, a family portrait, faces scratched out. I stepped closer, the rug's corner curled, revealing a trapdoor latch. My pulse kicked up. I flipped the catch. The door swung downward on rusty hinges. Below, the air was damp, musty, faintly chemical. I shone the light into a narrow stairwell disappearing into darkness. "Diaz," I whispered into my mic. "I'm going below." He clicked back. "I'll be right there." I descended, every step making the beam dance on cinder block walls. The stairs ended at a concrete floor slick with water. Ahead, a corridor extended, 15 feet, lined with doors. Each one bore a name in chipped paint. Mrs. Barnes, Taylor, unclaimed. The last door on the right was ajar, a sliver of yellow light seeping out. My gloved hand moved to my holster as I edged forward. The door opened silently into a small room. A single light bulb swung overhead, casting rolling shadows. At the center stood a woman, back turned, shoulders shaking. I whispered, "Ma'am?" "Police." She didn't turn. I took a cautious step. The floor beneath her boots was stained dark. I swallowed. "We got your call." She spun, face half illuminated. Wide eyes, pupils blown, tears streaking down cheeks. In her hand glinted a length of metal pipe. She raised it with a jerk. My hand flew to the radio. "Get down here now. We have possible armed subject." Footsteps thundered behind me. Diaz, breath ragged, gun trained. The woman took a step toward us. Her gaze flicked between us, frantic. "They're coming," she hissed, voice edged with terror. "You have to stop them." "Slow down," I said, keeping my tone firm. "Who's coming?" Her lips trembled. "The ones in the walls." I glanced around. The corrugated metal walls were nothing more than thin sheets attached to studs. No ventilation, no windows. She sank onto a metal chair, pipe clattering to the floor. They listen, they watch, they take what they want. My feet clicked on the damp concrete as I knelt before her. "Ma'am, who are they?" She shook her head. "You won't believe me." Her brow furrowed. She glanced at Diaz, eyes pleading. "I'm telling the truth." Diaz kept his gun raised, breathing through his nose. "Ma'am, keep that thing down. Let me. See your hands." Her arms rose slowly, pipe horizontal between them. Rainwater dripped from her hair into a dark puddle at her feet. I felt a pulse in my own wrist, the steady drum of adrenaline. "Please," she said, voice cracking. "Help me." Behind her, the corridor lights flickered and went out. Total darkness, save for our beams. I called, "Dispatch, we've got the subject in custody, but conditions are unusual. Send EMS and another unit." Static crackled. "Copy, Unit 47. Backup ETA 2 minutes." She leaned forward, voice a whisper. "You need to leave before they wake up." Her eyes darted toward the ceiling. On the metal plates overhead, the shadows seemed to twist. Hollow forms gliding inches above my head. Diaz swallowed, gun lowered an inch. "What?" A distant thump. Then another. The metal panels in the corridor rattled like a drum. I stood, back pressed against the wall. "Diaz, start moving." She stood, wild and vengeful, as another thud echoed, closer now, rhythmic, deliberate. Rain began to leak through the cracks above, hissing as it hit hot metal. The woman backed toward us, footsteps hesitant. She looked between the two of us, fear and desperation warring in her eyes. Behind me, the corridor's darkness seemed to deepen. My flashlight beam caught nothing. Yet I felt it, an emptiness just out of sight. A soft scrape, a nail on metal, skittered, drawing nearer. My gut clenched. I nudged Diaz. "Fall back now." He grabbed her arm. She let out a scream, raw, and tried to break free. Diaz jerked her toward the stairs as I covered their retreat. Every footstep up the creaking stairs sounded like thunder. We burst into the basement foyer, the trapdoor above slamming shut with a clang that reverberated down the hall. Heart hammering, I shot my beam at the closed door. Rainwater dripped off the wood. No latch on the room side. I yelled, "Open up!" But only my echo answered. Diaz guided the woman toward the stairs. Her eyes flicked over her shoulder. "They're behind us," she rasped. "Walk," he urged. "Keep moving." We reached the top landing. Light flickered above. The door to the first floor was shut. Not closed, though, looked locked. I rammed my shoulder into it. The wood cracked, splintered. It swung inward. I caught the door's edge and pulled us through. We tumbled into the kitchen. A single bare bulb buzzed overhead. The back door lay open, moonlight framing the wet yard beyond. I grabbed her elbow. This way. We stumbled outside into the yard, the rain stinging our faces. I radioed again. Dispatch, we're exiting. Subject in custody, possible basement hazards. Roger, 47, units 2, 3 are on scene. We made for the cruiser, her ragged breaths loud in the night. My pulse stubbornly raced. The woman collapsed against the black door, breathing hard. Diaz set the cuffs. She didn't struggle. I glanced back at the house. The windows glowed orange, though I hadn't seen any fire. The rain turned to frozen needles on my skin. I swallowed against my trembling throat. Diaz loaded her into the back seat. I slid behind the wheel, unholstered my radio mic. 1023 Pine Ridge, subject secure, awaiting medical. My voice was steady, too steady. Behind me, the woman whispered, "They're watching still." And I realized this call would follow me long after the night ended, long after I filed the report, because some doors, once opened, never stay shut. The station house loomed before us, fluorescent lights spilling onto the slick pavement like anxious ghosts. My partner, Diaz, guided the woman, shivering, soaked, cuffs tight, into the booking vestibule, while I peeled the rear seat door open. The fluorescent hum inside flickered, and for a moment the cell block looked less like walls and more like teeth. She stumbled forward, boots leaving muddy footprints on the tiled floor. Two desk sergeants glanced up, pens poised over keyboards. One eyed her, then us, eyebrow arching in question. I set down my flashlight with deliberate slowness, holstered my weapon, and cleared my throat. Subjects secure. EMS cleared her for transport. She's hypothermic, disoriented, needs evaluation. The sergeant, tall, wire-rimmed glasses glinting, nodded, shifting his weight behind his desk. "Intake," he murmured to the other, pressing a key. The screen blinked to life. Awaiting form. Diaz unclipped the handcuffs and slid them onto the desk. We found her in the basement of a vacant residence up Pine Ridge. Reports of screaming, flickering lights, blood handprint on the wall. He met my gaze, then turned back to the sergeant. No obvious signs of trauma besides exposure. Psychiatric consult recommended. The sergeant tapped a few keys. "We'll get her medical. You two fill out the initial report narrative. Ground floor, entry, descent into basement, subject exhibiting extreme fear, references to them in the walls." I nodded, shoulder weight settling onto the chair's hard plastic as Diaz and I sat side by side. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "On arrival, Unit 47 discovered unlocked front door," I began, voice low. The words felt hollow compared to the pounding in my chest, but I forced each sentence out, describing the peeling wallpaper, the blood-red handprint, the trap door, her frantic mutterings. My eyes darted to the booking cell behind us. The woman sat on the metal bench, knees drawn to her chin, rocking lightly. Her breath came fast, chest rising and falling like a wounded bird's. As I typed the final lines, subject calm after descent, transported without incident, recommend psychiatric evaluation, I felt a prick at the back of my neck. Cold dread, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to watch. I swallowed and handed the draft to the sergeant, who scanned it, made a few precise edits, then clicked accept. He printed 2 copies, one for records, one for the file. "Thank you," I said, collecting the pages. We'll follow up on her status." Diaz and I rose, crossing to the cell. The woman lifted her head as we approached. Her eyes were red-rimmed but sharp, focusing on me as if peering beyond the uniform. She whispered, voice brittle, "You didn't hear it, did you?" I paused, pen in hand. "Hear what?" She tilted her head toward the ceiling. The overhead light buzzed once. "It's under the panels," she said, "even here, behind walls." Diaz cleared his throat. "Ma'am, let's get you to medical." He offered a gloved hand, and she took it without hesitation. We led her down the hall toward the infirmary. The station's corridors were narrow, linoleum echoing our footsteps. Deputies passed, eyes fixed on watches or monitors. No one offered to look at her, though she wore cuffs still. The door to medical swung open. A nurse in scrubs beckoned. I stepped back, exchanging a glance with Diaz. He mouthed, "This isn't over." I nodded. "We'll be available," I managed. She slipped inside. The door clicked shut, and the corridor felt colder. Diaz and I lingered outside the infirmary. I leaned against the wall, tapping my boot against the floor tile. "That place," I said, voice barely above a murmur. "The cell names on those doors, Barnes, Taylor, unclaimed. Doesn't make sense." "Amazingly," he replied, shoulders stiff. "I've never seen a basement like that in this jurisdiction." He shook his head. "It was like someone built it to vanish people." My stomach churned. I rubbed at the back of my neck. And the power was on underground. No meter, no generator. Who kept those lights running? He raised an eyebrow. "Questions for the detectives." I straightened. The nurse's door opened. The woman emerged, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, cheeks flush with warmth. She paused in the doorway, looking down the hallway at us. "They followed me here," she said. Diaz sighed. "You're in a safe place now." Her lips quivered. "Walls don't keep them out." She backed into the room, and the door closed with a soft click. Diaz and I stepped back. I keyed my radio. 47 to dispatch, subject secured at station, intake complete. Requesting detective unit for follow-up on vacant residence, possible kidnapping facility, over. Dispatcher voice crackled back. "Copy that, 47. Detectives en route, ETA 10 minutes. We walked toward the break room, silent. I rubbed my temples. The station's low buzz of machinery, printers, computers, vents, felt oppressive. I poured coffee from the pot, black and hot. The steam curled upward like a warning. Diaz leaned against the counter, wrapping his hands around the mug. "You okay?" he asked. I took a sip, bitter, grounding. "I've seen weird," I said softly, "but nothing like that." I closed my eyes, recalling the way the metal panels had loomed overhead, silent as death. "That woman, she believes it's alive." He nodded. "Let's wait for the detectives." We sat in a corner booth, the laminate tabletop scarred with years of coffee rings and cigarette burns. The minutes stretched. My gaze drifted to the station clock. 20 past midnight. The air tasted stale. Somewhere in a locked cell, the woman muttered to herself, could hear her sometimes, a soft sob or a whispered phrase. "They never stop." I shivered. Diaz set his mug down. "You want to drive by the house again, with the detectives?" I looked at him, surprised. "Now?" He shrugged. "Might as well. Get eyes on it before morning crews show up. Get our statements fresh." He studied my face. "You're not thinking you saw what she saw, are you?" "Not yet." I rested my forehead against my knuckles. "But I don't like the idea of what I missed." Shadows from the single overhead tube light drifted across the room as the door opened and a detective, sheriff's gray blazer over his uniform, walked in. He nodded at us. You two brought her in? I stood, coffee sloshing. Yes, sir. He sank into the booth opposite. Show me the report. He tapped the copy on the table, then rubbed his chin. Basement facility. No record of electrical supply, multiple nameplates. On doors, and subject claims voices behind walls. No obvious signs of wiring, speakers, cameras. I shook my head. Concrete corridor with metal sheathing. No wiring visible, no sound system, just dark. My throat tightened. She thought someone was inside the walls. He frowned. No structural entry, no ducts, crawl spaces. None. Diaz leaned forward. Unless somebody crawls behind the sheets, jacks into the studs, and moves in complete darkness. He exhaled in frustration. Who in their right mind? The detective stared at us, brows knitted. Lightning flickered outside, momentarily illuminating the break room windows. A distant rumble of thunder answered. I stood, heart hammering. We should go now, before any evidence gets compromised. He nodded and stood. Get your cruiser, follow me. Diaz and I exchanged a look, part dread, part determination. The corridor lights flickered as we stepped into the hallway. I gripped my flashlight, pockets of rainwater still dripping from my jacket. The detective led us out the side door. The cold night air slapped our faces, washing away the station's recycled heat, but not the weight of the basement. The cruiser's headlights nearly blinded us as we slid behind the wheel. I eased onto the road leading to Pine Ridge. The houses passed in a blur, dark shapes in the rain. No lights on except the glow from the station's rearview mirror. My reflection stared back. Tired eyes, pale in the console light. We arrived back at the cul-de-sac, engine off again. The boarding house loomed, windows shuttered. The front porch light was dead. No glow from inside. I killed my mic. We're back, I said, stepping from the cruiser. Diaz followed. The detective checked his weapon light. Stay close. We approached the front door, solid, unbroken now, the handprint gone. No welcome mat, no whiskey bottle. The siding looked cleaner. My breath caught. They've wiped it clean. The detective clicked his radio. Crime Unit 1, you copy? On scene at 4822 Pine Ridge. Possible clandestine basement. Need forensics. A crackle then. Copy that. ETA 15. He glared at the door. Something's off. He lifted his shoulder and shoved. The door creaked, but held. No forced entry. He frowned, turning to me. Did you lock it last time? I'm sure I did. My voice trembled. The hairs on my arms prickled. The orderly station report now felt fragile. The layers of paperwork, the printed nameplates and evidence, all of it could vanish, just like that room. Diaz knelt and ran his hand along the doorframe. No blood, no mud. It's like nothing happened here. I swallowed and tried the latch, locked. The basement, I whispered. It's gone. The detective clicked off the radio. Stay here. He circled the house, shining his beam against the walls. My flashlight caught the siding's texture, grooves and ridges, but no seams for a basement door. The floor above was black, unlit. My stomach lurched. I glanced at Diaz, who stared at the ground. A low groan echoed beneath our feet. Metal scraping on concrete, soft but deliberate. We froze. The detective whipped around, gun up. The sound came again, a slide, like a heavy panel shifting. Then silence. My heart hammered. What was that? He didn't answer. He lifted his light to the porch floor. There, at the threshold, lay a single metal latch, rusted, smeared with dark streaks that gleamed in the beam. My jaw clenched. That didn't used to be there. He reached down, traced the latch. No keyhole, no hinges, just a rough hook. I felt dizzy. The grooves in the siding seemed to twist, as if welcoming me back inside. Lightning struck, illuminating the house in stark white. The front door swung inward a few inches. No creak, no groan, just a slow, deliberate movement, as if pushed by something unseen. The darkness beyond seemed to pulse, beckoning. My breath caught in my throat. I raised my flashlight, hand shaking. The beam hit the open doorway, nothing moved. Silence. Then a whisper, so faint I thought it was in my mind. I never left. I stumbled back, blood pounding. Diaz grabbed my arm. We need backup, now. The detective activated his radio. As thunder rolled overhead, I stared into the darkness of that open door, realizing that whatever we'd found once was still there, waiting behind walls we thought were empty. The corrugated breeze off the cul-de-sac carried the residue of rain, cold and clammy, as I edged closer to the yawning doorway. Detective Henderson held his light steady, beam cutting through the inky black. Behind him, Diaz paled, sweat beading at his hairline even though the night air had dropped into the 40s. I swallowed, voice hoarse as I keyed the mic. Dispatch, Code 3 update. Front door reopened. Seeking entry authorization, forensics en route. The static stuttered back. Copy 47. Proceed with caution. My boot cracked on the threshold plank. The moment felt elastic. Stretched by dread. I lifted the detective's elbow and stepped inside first, offering cover as I entered. The beam flared across the foyer. Virgin dust settled on the creaking rug. No welcome mat. The floral wallpaper was smooth, bone white now, the handprint gone without a trace. The whiskey bottle was nowhere to be seen. No debris, no sign we'd ever been here at all. It was impossible, yet I lived it. I shone my light at the staircase. Clean, pale wood, no trapdoor latch visible on the floorboards, just a simple entrance to the second story. The detective glanced back. Not here, his tone low. Check the living area. I swept left. The doorway to the living room gaped like a wound. My flashlight revealed nothing but a threadbare couch, pillows askew, upholstery damp from runoff. No coffee table shards, no scrap of the torn photo with scratched-out faces. The mantel was empty. Even the framed family photograph we'd torn from its frame in Section 1 had vanished. I swallowed thickly and flicked my light upward. The ceiling register over the couch was locked shut. No twisting grate, just a flush panel. Diaz hovered beside me. He tapped the wall where the red handprint had been. His finger came away clean. It's like someone pressure-washed everything. His voice trembled. The detective swept past us toward the dining room entrance. He snapped his radio again, uneasy. Forensics, you copy. We need bio, whatever. Blood residue, fiber samples. The subject said blood was in the basement. Now there's nothing. Eyes on scene? The radio crackled but yielded nothing but silence. I forced a breath and followed him. The dining room was empty except for a table pushed flush against the wall. The chandelier above hung straight, bulbs cold. I checked each chair. None were missing. The buffet cabinet was closed, its glass doors intact, no sign of forced entry. I'd sworn I'd witnessed it open, watched papers flutter. I raked my memory and doubted it, because none of it lined up anymore. A low moan drifted from behind us. We snapped around. The hallway leading to the basement stairs stood as it had before. Door shut, no hinges visible. My heart ricocheted. My flashlight beam flickered as if uncertain. I stepped forward, training my light on the door frame. There, just below the surface of the wallboard, a fine crack, hairline, almost invisible. Detective Henderson clicked his tongue. You see that? I nodded, voice tight. Looks new. He probed the crack with his pen light. It widened slightly, revealing darkness beyond. We all exchanged a look. The threshold had shifted, surfaced where there had been none. I crouched and traced the crack's edge. Smooth, precise. Nothing jagged or raw. This wasn't rot, it was engineered. Diaz cleared his throat, voice low. "We need that basement opened again." The detective reached for his handcuffs, clipping on plastic cable ties to our belts. "Guard the front." He drew his baton. "I'm going in." I grabbed the radio mic, hands shaking. 47 to dispatch. Detective proceeding with basement entry. Backup code 4 not required yet. The radio stuttered back static. No acknowledgement. He turned the pen light toward the crack, then pressed his shoulder against the wall. Something gave beneath the panel. It slid inward, revealing a hidden latch and vertical seam. A click, and the panel slipped aside, exposing a narrow metal stairway that spiraled downward beyond reach of our beams. The smell hit me first, damp earth and something metallic, like fresh copper. It pulsed with a life of its own. I swallowed against the sour taste in my mouth. "What?" "You two, stay here," the detective ordered. His voice was flat, wary. He stepped onto the first rung. Each metal stair bit into the rubber treads of his boots. I leaned forward, peering over the edge. Nothing but swirling darkness. He flicked his light downward. 2 flights, then a landing, then another set of steps. The panel hissed shut behind him. Diaz and I backed away, shoulders pressed to opposite walls of the hallway. My pulse thundered as I raised my flashlight to the closed panel. Rainwater dripped through a crack in the flooring above, where our earlier smash had broken the seal. The droplets plinked onto an unseen surface below, like ghosts we couldn't see. A whisper, far below. I froze. Diaz shushed me, gun drawn. The panel door rattled but didn't open. We strained to hear. The whisper rose into words. "Don't leave." Diaz whirled, shining his beam at the locked panel. I fumbled my radio. 47 to detective, "You copy?" No response. Just static and that faint voice echoing in the hollow. I hurried to the panel, pried at its edges. My fingers slipped on moisture-coated metal. I glanced at Diaz, his face pale. "We have to go down after him." He nodded, swallowing. "On 3. I crouched, yanked the latch. The panel groaned open, catching the detective's light from below. He stood on the landing, flashlight beam now tilted upward, showing a vacant corridor, identical to the first basement level, except the walls here glistened with streaks of rust and something darker. Thin rivulets, almost black, snaking into the concrete floor. He glanced up. "Clear," he called. "Keep it that way." I climbed down the stairs first, heart hammering so loud I thought the radio mic would pick it up. Each step felt treacherous, condensation slicking the treads. On the landing, I set my foot. The detective's light cut a pale circle on the wall, words painted in the same smeared pigment as the handprint upstairs. "Welcome home." My breath caught. The pigment, thick, viscous, ran in rivulets as if painted in a hurry. The letters were jagged, half-formed, like someone had known they had only seconds. I reached out, finger hovering above the text. It quivered, as though alive, before a sudden draft swept the corridor, snuffing out my flashlight. Pitch black swallowed everything. My chest constricted. I fumbled the radio mic. "Detective, status." Static. Nothing. The only sound was the distant drip-drip of water, slowly echoing down the hall. Then, at the far end of the corridor, a soft pulse of yellow light flared. An emergency panel kicking on. One bulb, nothing else. Diaz's whisper came from above. "Turn it back on." He kicked at the stairs, but they groaned under his weight. He jerked, swearing, as he tried to reach me. I lifted my beam, now trembling, to the emergency bulb. Beneath it lay a gurney, its white sheet stained in patterns I couldn't bear to look at. No body, but the sheet was soaked, saturated. The rust-red pattern made my stomach lurch. The detective's beam swept past the gurney and froze on the far wall. Another inscription, sprawling across 2 panels. Stay. The letters were carved, gouged deeper than paint, edged with glints that could have been residual blood or oil. My jaw clenched. Behind me, a door creaked open. The metal handle scraped against the frame. I spun, gun drawn, heart strobing. The door swung inward into darkness that even the emergency light couldn't penetrate. A voice, low, raspy, slithered through the gloom. You can't go. I swallowed, words caught in my throat. The detective's flashlight beam flared at the door's mouth, illuminating nothing but the bare, concrete floor. I glanced at Diaz above, helpless. The gurney's sheet stirred, as though a breeze passed beneath it. Footsteps, multiple, echoed. They didn't belong to us. They circled the gurney, distant, measured, like someone pacing just out of reach. My flashlight jittered as I raised it, trying to catch movement. Nothing. Yet the footsteps grew louder, closing in. My breathing went shallow. I radioed, voice cracking. 47 to dispatch. Need immediate assistance at location, basement corridor. Officer down, suspect unknown. Static, only static. The footsteps stopped. Silence crashed over me. Then, directly behind my ear, a whisper. We warned you. I nearly jumped out of my skin. My flashlight fell to the floor, beam dancing at random. I kicked it aside, clattering into the wall. Detecting its last beam, I snatched my weapon and spun. The detective's silhouette stood at the end of the corridor, gun lowered, head tilted. His voice trembled. We need to get out. Now. He turned and fled up the stairs, light bouncing, revealing the dripping walls and that gurney drenched in rust red. Diaz scrambled after him. I hesitated, drawn to the gurney. A cracked vial lay on the floor, its contents spilled, a viscous liquid that stained the concrete a darker brown. I kicked it away and charged up the stairs, adrenaline flooding my limbs. Behind me, the corridor fell silent again. No voices, no footsteps, no light. Just the echo of my boots and my own ragged breath. At the top, the detective shoved the panel shut so hard it groaned. He fumbled the latch and the wall slid back into place, seamless once more. The musty drag of the basement vanished. We tumbled into the hallway, breathless. I keyed my radio. 47-47 exclamation mark. Do you copy? My words echoed in the empty hall. No response. The detective's face was pale white in the emergency exit's glow. He swore under his breath. No power in the building, no backups. The station never got our pings. He rubbed his face with both hands. They cut us off. Diaz sank against the wall, sliding to the floor, stomach heaving. What the hell is going on? He croaked. I crouched beside him, hand on his shoulder. We're in something, not normal. My voice sounded distant. My vision tunneled on the closed panel behind us, surface smooth as plaster. They're here. Detective Henderson crouched too, gun ready. His wide eyes reflected the flicker of the hall's lone bulb. We have to document it, he said. No matter what, get evidence. I shook my head. There's nothing left here. My gaze drifted to the ceiling vent, simple grill, unmoving. Unless they want us to find something else. He rubbed his chin, breathing hard. We go back to headquarters, he said at last. We brief the chief. We bring in SWAT, K-9, everything. And maybe we call the coroner for that gurney. Coroner? Diaz spat. Sir, we ran for our lives. His tone cracked. We should have left that woman and just stayed out of it. I closed my eyes, leaning back, staring at the tile floor. The dead weight of dread settled over me like an undertow, the woman's whispers, the pounding beneath the walls, the voices that wouldn't quit. A lifetime of police calls had never felt so small or so personal. The detective stood, scooping up the spilled vial from his pocket. He squeezed it tight, shattering it in his gloved hand. He ground it into the tile until the liquid pooled. "No trace," he muttered. "No DNA, nothing." I looked from him to Diaz, two seasoned officers, shaken. And I realized paperwork might erase names, walls might conceal horrors, basement levels might vanish, but this night would never be forgotten. We stepped into the open yard, each of us breathing in the rain-washed air. No flicker at the windows, no hint of the panels hidden below. The cul-de-sac lay quiet, as if it had never woken under the weight of screaming. Pine trees swayed in a gentle breeze. The only sound was distant thunder and our own ragged hearts, echoes of what had crept behind walls, ready for the next ones foolish enough to listen. We stood on the slick asphalt, headlights cutting pale arcs into the mist as Pine Ridge's boarding house sank back into the night like a wounded animal retreating into its den. Detective Henderson's words hung between us, heavier than the rain. Paperwork may not save us. Evidence may vanish, but this would follow us always. He wiped the brim of his jacket and keyed the cruiser's door. "We're going back to the station," he said, voice taut. "We need to get statements, pull surveillance, mark the site." Diaz and I exchanged a look. My legs felt leaden after the crawl through that basement, the panic, the voices, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't ready to leave it alone. "Sir," I said, "our radios—" He cut me off with a sharp motion. "Use your cell, call precinct command directly. If the radio's dead, we improvise." I fumbled my phone from my pocket. No signal. The screen showed searching. I tried again. Nothing. Diaz pulled out his same result. The detective scowled at both devices. "Of course," he muttered. "Cell towers must be down." We climbed into the cruiser, roof-mounted lights clicking off in protest as I closed the door. The interior smelled of damp gear and old coffee. I turned the key. The engine roared and settled into its idle hum. I flicked the dome light on. Darkness pooled around the windshield. No glow from the station now, no blue beacon in the distance. It felt like we'd driven into another realm. Detective Henderson slid into the passenger seat and unrolled a crumpled map of Fairfax County. He traced a finger along the road back toward town. "Backup's supposed to hit Pine Ridge at 1300, he said. "It's 20 minutes past midnight, so they should be on their way." He tapped at his Apple Watch. No reply. "Great, they're not coming." Diaz sat in back, cuffed weary woman absent from her seat here. He stared out the window at the darkened houses passing, shutters closed and silent. Every few seconds he glanced at the rearview mirror, as if expecting to see her crumpled form slumped against the glass. I slipped the cruiser into gear and shifted onto the road, tires hissing on the wet pavement. The drive back was disorienting. Street lamps flickered out in sequence as we passed. First one, then the next, until only the cruiser's headlights pierced the night. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. I focused on the double yellow lines, tracing them inch by inch, counting each pulse of my own heartbeat to stay calm. "Detective," I ventured, voice unsteady, "that gurney, the stains, the vial, that thing was used for what, exactly?" He didn't answer at first. The cruiser rounded a curve and briefly caught a glint of moonlight on something tall at the roadside. A shed? A sign? I couldn't tell. He leaned forward, adjusting the map's crease. "I don't know," he said at last. But there was blood, fresh, Equipment we found down there suggests some kind of containment. It looked like a makeshift clinic. Diaz wheezed from the back seat. "A clinic where?" His voice cracked. "Who?" I glanced in the mirror. Nobody knows. We fell into heavy silence, pierced only by the axle's soft creak and the rain's drumming. I flicked the windshield wipers. Slow, hesitant swipes that did little to clear the residue. The houses thinned out, backyards opening onto dense thickets. The mist closed in around the cruiser like a curtain. Up ahead, the road dipped and leveled off again. I braked as a shape emerged on the center line. A lone figure, dark and still, soaked through. I stomped on the brake. The cruiser's rear tires locked, squealing. The figure lifted an arm, pointing toward us with a crooked finger. I cleared my throat. What the hell? Detective Henderson clicked his seatbelt off and pushed open his door. "Stay here," he whispered, rising. His boots hit the ground and splashed in a shallow puddle. He strode toward the stranger with the confident gait of someone who knew every dark corner of his jurisdiction, until he was within 20 feet, and the figure raised both arms in a slow arc, as if conducting the raindrops. I stepped out behind him, gun drawn, heart pounding so loud I could hear its echoes in my ears. The stranger's head tilted upward. I shone my flashlight, empty eye sockets, no flesh. Just bone-white emptiness. The skull gleamed wetly under my beam. I swallowed, throat constricting. "Detective," he froze, hand halfway to his holster. The stranger lifted a foot, bare, skeletal, then stepped forward. Not walking, but drifting. The pavement beneath it remained dry as though the raindrops avoided its presence. My skin crawled. "Back up," I snarled. The detective stumbled, blinked, and nodded. We retreated to the cruiser, heels slipping on wet asphalt. The stranger's head followed us, jaw hinging in a slow grin. I slammed the door, locking us in. Diaz pressed his forehead against the glass. "You're not real." His words were breathless. Detective Henderson yanked his radio from his belt. 47 dispatch, he barked. "Emergency." Static. No response. He slammed the radio onto the console. The stranger extended both arms, beckoning. We watched in horror as its form blurred, edges melting into the mist. Then it was gone, as though it had never stood there. The road was empty. The trees whispered. I turned the ignition key, nothing. The engine sputtered and died. The dome light flickered once, then went out. The raindrops on the roof sounded like tiny explosions of menace. The cruiser's interior plunged into darkness. Diaz fumbled for his phone again. Still no signal. The detective pounded the steering wheel. "We're stranded. Phone's dead. Engine killed. Radio silent." He swallowed hard, voice low. "We need to get out of here on foot." I forced my legs to move. I cracked the door open. Cold air slammed in. The stranger's laughter echoed faintly over the rain, a hollow rattle. I jolted back, heart in my throat. "Door," I muttered. Diaz and I pushed both passenger doors open. The rain rushed in, drenching us instantly. I handed my flashlight to the detective. "Lead." He clicked it on and headed for the figure of a house we passed moments ago, dark, with one broken window. "South driveway," he said. "We can cut through yards toward the main road." We bounded into the storm, boots sinking into wet grass. The yard lights flickered as we passed the boarded-up shed, its door ajar. I nearly tripped as the detective's beam fell on the words carved into the wood, the same smeared letters from the basement. "Run." My breath froze. I swallowed and pointed. "They're trying to tell us something." He didn't answer. He just kept moving. flashlight beam bobbing over fences, around thorn bushes. Diaz tripped on a root and fell forward, soaking his sidearm. He cursed and righted himself. Up ahead, the street lamps blazed again. We emerged onto Riverside Drive. Empty cars parked along the curb, doors locked. The detective shone the light at a sedan with its headlights on, engine idling. "That's ours." He jogged forward. We climbed inside, grateful for the weak glow of the instrument cluster. I turned the key. Engine roared to life as if nothing had happened. The radio crackled. 47, report. The dispatch voice was frantic. Relief flooded me. I shivered. "Dispatch, we're on Riverside. Medical en route for subject. We've got sight of an unknown in the road, no sign of temp injury. Over." The voice crackled back. "Copy that. Send your location now. Are you safe?" I think so." My teeth chattered. We pulled onto the main road. The stranger's laughter followed us down Riverside, drifting into the trees. I glanced in the rearview mirror. No skeletal figure, no houses, just the road curving away. Detective Henderson exhaled. We made it. But as the cruiser's headlights passed a broken roadside reflector, the beam caught something scrawled on the asphalt just ahead. "Never safe." My hands tightened on the wheel. My breath froze. I realized then that we'd only outrun one nightmare. Another was crawling right beneath the road we drove, waiting for us to slow down. And somewhere behind the dashboard, the radio crackled again. "Unit 47, confirm your status." I swallowed. "I confirm," I said. "But we're not safe." The static hummed an answer, trailing away into the roar of the engine and the endless, unseen shadows beyond the street lamps. The cruiser's windshield wipers cut an uneven rhythm across the glass as we sped toward the station. Detective Henderson at the wheel now, shoulders taut, eyes fixed on the road's shimmer. Every street lamp we passed seemed to blink out. Behind us, as if the house's reach stretched beyond Pine Ridge, swallowing light in its wake. I sat in the passenger seat, earbuds of rainwater dribbling down my collar, replaying the last words smothered by static. "Never safe." Diaz hunched in the back, forehead pressed to the window, breathing quiet but ragged. He'd dozed off minutes ago, only to jerk awake at every flash of lightning, convinced the skeletal figure lingered in the rear view's shadows. I glanced at him, then back at Detective Henderson, whose knuckles roamed the steering wheel in restless arcs. We didn't speak. No one wanted to acknowledge the question flickering between us. If the station has no power, no radio, no records, what awaits when we return? The cruiser's engine hummed, a thin barrier between us and the world outside. Rain cascaded off the hood in rivulets, pooling at the windshield's base like a tide. Detective Henderson flicked the switch for the overhead map light, illuminating a cluster of cellophane-wrapped donuts and the folded forensic log. He rifled through the log until he found our entry. Blank lines where we'd expected a detailed crime scene write-up. He tapped the page with a finger. "Look at this," he said quietly. "It's blank." I leaned over. The heading read, "Evidence collected," and beneath, not a single item recorded. No mention of blood swabs, no noto of the gurney stains, no entry for the hidden panel latch. My throat constricted. Did someone erase it? He closed the log with a snap. Or maybe nothing was ever logged. His voice barely rose above the engine's thrum, which means the only record of what happened tonight is in our heads. I swallowed, heart pounding. Then we need to find proof, photos, samples, anything. He pressed his thumb against a donut's cellophane and peeled it back, crumbling paper beneath. By the time we get back, the detectives from patrol will be here. They'll want us to finalize statements. They'll ask for hard evidence. We'll have nothing. Diaz rubbed the condensation from the window. We barely made it out alive. Now they'll lock us in admin for making it look like we saw ghosts. His voice was raw with frustration. I looked back at him. We saw what we saw. The road curved under a broken streetlight. Our headlights swept the sidewalk, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw her. The woman we'd booked, standing under the lamp's black halo, eyes wide as if her trance had followed us all the way here. I blinked. She wasn't there, just sprays of water from guttering, sweat on the road's edge. Detective Henderson exhaled, glancing in the mirror. We'll go to the precinct, gather our own photos. I'll drive us around to the back entrance. Less likely to be seen, less chance of someone telling us to get lost. He set the donut on the dash and swiped at the rain on the windshield. We approached the precinct's rear lot. Row upon row of darkening cruisers, their antennas drooping like wilted stems. The station's building loomed washed in pale moonlight through fractured clouds. No flashing lights greeted us, no squad car idling at the door. It looked abandoned. Detective Henderson killed the engine. A cadet's broken neon sign, open, hung askew in the lobby window. The glass was stamped with the department's seal, twisted now like a dull eye staring back at us. He opened his door. "Stay inside," he said softly, voice taut. He stepped onto the pavement, flashlight in hand. The wet asphalt flickered under his beam. No footprints, no evidence of earlier commotion. The station's side door, normally propped open for late-night shift changes, was sealed tight. No crack, no latch, just a smooth pane of metal. He knocked. Soft at first. Tap, 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 no response. He raised his fist, struck harder. Bam, bam. The hollow echo faded. I strained to hear movement within, but heard nothing but my own heart. Diaz's whisper came from the passenger seat. "He's not getting in." I unlatched my door. "We go around front?" He shook his head, face grim. "No, front's probably locked too. They shut the entire station down when the alarms went out." I bit my lip. Our options were shrinking. We could call for backup if the phones worked, but we had no proof anything was wrong. It sounded like a bad call, an overreaction. I didn't trust the precinct's systems after what we'd experienced. I unbuckled. "Everyone out." Diaz blinked at me. "What?" "We split up. Detective, you head inside through the locked lobby entrance. There has to be a master key or an override in the control room. Diaz and I will slip around to the evidence locker, pull the dashcam footage, take pictures of our cruiser, anything." He exhaled through his nose and nodded. "Cowboy plan," he said, shaking his head, "but I like it." We climbed out. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. My boots splashed onto the concrete bay. The air hardly moved. I followed Diaz around the corner, where security cameras dangled, limply, angled toward an empty alley. The evidence locker door was down that hall, marked by a small placard. "Evidence control. Authorized personnel only." Diaz tried the handle. It clicked, but didn't budge. He ground his teeth. I circled the padlock. No key slot, just a digital keypad blinking green as if awaiting input. A sensor above it glowed red. "No code," I muttered. He leaned against the wall. "We need to get those dashcam APs. The cruiser's unit has been logging. Should be time-stamped footage of the whole time at Pine Ridge." I scanned the corridor. No alarms, no sign of movement. The station's hum of machinery had drowned out earlier. Here, the silence was oppressive. I crouched, peeking under the door. The locker was empty. The Houdini's panel I'd seen earlier flickered in my mind, hinges invisible. I shivered. "Diaz, give me your pen." He handed it over, eyebrow raised. I slid the pen's clip into the rubber seal around the door frame, prying gently. Metal groaned. The lock disengaged. I eased the door open. Inside, shelves lined the walls, boxes stamped with evidence numbers, a workstation with a small safe embedded under the counter. The safe had a biometric scanner, but the drawer above it was unlocked, where the cruiser's dashcam SD cards were kept in a labeled envelope. I lifted the envelope. Inside, glossy micro SDs, each marked with dates and times. I pressed a card into my coat pocket. Diaz rifled through the boxes, pulling out the cruiser video log and its matching cable. "Let's get this out," he said quietly. I pocketed the cards and cable. The door clicked shut behind us on its own. We froze. I glanced at Diaz, eyes wide. The padlock was back in place. The corridor was silent. Diaz swallowed. "They're watching." I nodded, heart slamming. We head back to the cruiser, then front entrance, meet the detective. We slipped back through the drizzle to the cruiser. Detective Henderson waited by the driver's door, rain beating on his hat. He gave the nod, no words, just a lift of his chin. I started the engine. He slid in shotgun, cable, and micro SDs on his lap, fingers fanning through the stack. "Let's get some answers," he said, voice steadier now. I pulled onto the road away from the station. As the dark building receded, I watched the dashboard's glow reflect in the windshield. We passed the last of the street lamps, still dark, but the road ahead was open, empty. I realized then that the real danger hadn't been in the walls or behind the panel. It was in the places we trusted to protect us, the station, the evidence locker, the files. Those had been compromised, warped by something alive. A distant thunder rolled. In the back, Diaz pressed his forehead to the window. Outside, a single streetlight flickered on, far ahead, illuminating the boarded window of a shuttered house. The light revealed a shadow moving behind the boards, a face, gaunt, watching us go. My breath froze. I eased the cruiser past without slowing. In the rearview mirror, the face receded, fading into shadow, still watching, still waiting. And as the station disappeared behind us for good, I understood. Some calls follow you off shift, out of the precinct, into the open road. Some voices don't quit even when the walls fall away, and the echo of their warning, never safe, would ride with me until my last breath. I slipped behind the wheel of my cruiser at 0012 hours, the glow of the dashboard instruments painting my uniform in a sickly green light. Rain drummed a steady tattoo on the roof as I eased the Ford Taurus onto the slick asphalt of County Route 47. My name is Carter Hayes, badge number 4712, 32 years old, 8 years in South Jersey PD, 5 on patrol, 3 in investigations. I've worked every shift imaginable, seen every kind of wreck and disturbance this sleepy county could serve up. Late-night bar fights, stray dogs snarling at drunk teenagers, the occasional suicidal jumper off the overpass. But nothing prepared me for the call that came in just 5 minutes ago. A 1028 welfare check. Faint screaming heard at 412 Ruston Lane. Ruston Lane was a cul-de-sac of cookie-cutter ranch homes, each surrounded by meticulously trimmed hedges and whisper-quiet lawns. Tonight, the street was empty, the only illumination from my spotlight slicing through the fog like a scalpel. I flicked on the overhead lights as I rolled to a stop in front of number 412. Gravel crunched under the tires. The house sat in darkness, its porch light dead, windows black voids. I clipped on my flashlight to my belt, secured my taser, and keyed the mic. Hayes to dispatch, on scene at 412 Ruston Lane. No visual on complainant. House dark, aside from interior glow. Copy, 47. Dispatch replied. Neighbor reports faint child's voice, screaming. Approach with caution. I inhaled, the chilled air burning my lungs through the open window. I stepped onto the damp gravel, boots slipping as I crossed the lawn. My flashlight cut a path across the front door, ajar. A hush fell over everything but my own breath. Inside, the foyer was silent. Wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the floorboards moaned under my weight. I called out, voice steady, "South Jersey PD, anyone here?" Silence answered. I advanced into the living room. Couch cushions were depressed, as if someone had just risen. A coffee mug lay on its side under the end table, brownish stains pooling on the carpet. My beam found muddy footprints. A single sole, small, bare, smudged in with dirt from outside. I knelt to inspect the print. It had a narrow arch, the heel pressed at an angle, toes splayed like a child tiptoeing. I radioed, "Dispatch, possible juvenile inside. Request backup and EMS on standby." Static, then copy 47. My light swept the room. Family photos on the mantel, each image etched in dust. A smiling couple and a little boy in a striped shirt. The boy's eyes seemed too real, as if he were watching me. I swallowed and moved toward the hallway, where a faint glow pulsed from beneath a closed door. Footsteps in the hallway were muffled, but I heard a soft whimper, childlike, scared. I braced against the wall, heart pounding. The door was locked. I rapped on it. "Police, open up." No answer. I tugged at the knob, stuck. I drew my taser and fired at the lock plate, nails charring wood without giving way. I knelt beside the door, switching to silent entry. My partner, if he were here, would have pried it open. Alone, I fired 2 rounds of the taser at the hinges. Sparks flew. The door gave a reluctant creak and swung inward. Inside was a child's bedroom. Pastel walls, a canopy bed draped with faded curtains, shelves lined with worn toys. The glow came from a nightlight shaped like an owl. On the wall above the bed was scrawled, in crayon, "Help me." Beneath it, muddy footprints, half erased in panic. I swept the beam over the floor. Books flipped open, a teddy bear missing an eye. I called softly, "Hey there, are you all right?" No answer. I edged forward, eyes scanning every shadow. Under the bed, I saw movement, a flash of navy blue flannel. I knelt and reached in, pulling out a small frame, clad in mud-caked shirt and shaking violently. A boy, maybe 6 or 7, pale as chalk, with tear-streaked cheeks and eyes wide with terror. He whimpered as I lifted him, limbs rigid. His arms flailed, whispering, "No, no." His voice was thin, almost drowned by the thunder of my own pulse. I eased the boy to his feet. His small sneakers were untied, his shirt was soaked through. With one arm around his ribs, I swept my other hand over the floor. No other footprints, no sign of struggle. The window was closed, the closet door was locked. No exit for a kid except up through the floor or down through the walls. I radioed in, voice hushed. 47, juvenile in custody, no suspect on site, requesting K9 and metal detector team for vents and crawl space. 10-4-47, dispatch confirmed. I scooped the boy into my arms. He clung to my shirt, body trembling. I carried him outside to my cruiser, where Johnson's headlights splashed the yard. I climbed in the back seat, holding him close. The heat from the defroster steamed the windows. He wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "They're gone?" His voice cracked with fear. I pressed my cheek against the top of his head. "They can't hurt you now," I murmured, although my own words sounded hollow. "I won't let them." He nodded, eyes closing. Johnson arrived, climbing out and moving to my door. I opened it and handed the boy off to EMS. paramedics whose faces flattened when they saw the blank stare in his eyes and the crayon scrawl on his cheek. They covered him with a blanket and loaded him into the ambulance. I locked eyes with Johnson. "Something's not right," I said. Johnson nodded. "No sign of abduction. House locked up tight, no prints except his, no CCTV, no neighbors saw anyone come or go." I grabbed my flashlight and followed them back inside. The living room was empty again. Footprints vanished as if never there. I clicked my radio. 47 to dispatch. House clear. Initiating search of vents and crawl space. The forensic team arrived with K9 and a metal detector. Maya, our cadaver dog, nosed at the living room floor, then led them to the hallway vent. They pried the grate off. Bare metal ducts stretched into darkness. I dropped to my knees and crawled in, light dancing over dust. At the first junction, I found small gouges, fingernail marks, fresh. Crawling forward, I felt a draft, cold, stale, and smelled iron. I followed it to a secondary chamber where the metal was warped outward, as if forced from behind. I hesitated, but I've never left a kid trapped. I shone the beam inside. Dark corners revealed nothing but empty space and the echo of my own breath. I called, "Johnson, this section looks modified. We need to trace it to the crawl space below." He signaled the team. They peeled the floorboards in the adjacent closet, uncovering a hatch. I removed it. Cobwebs clung to the edges, and lowered my light. Below was a narrow crawl space, earthen walls slick with moisture. The dog whined and nosed at a thick smear on the ground. Rust red stain, congealed. I signaled for gloves and scooped up a sample. It tested presumptively human. My stomach lurched. I radioed dispatch. "Hayes, possible homicide evidence. Need all available units here." My own voice sounded distant. Rain pounded on the roof above. I stayed in the crawl space until dawn, guiding teams through the labyrinth of ducts and tunnels beneath the house. Each inch revealed fresh enigmas. Muddy footprints appearing and disappearing. Crayon messages etched on hidden walls. "Not safe? Find me behind you." No suspect, no body, no resolution. Just the boy's terrified whisper looping through my mind. "They're gone?" When the sun broke, I emerged from the crawl space, hands trembling and skin slick with grime. The house was sealed, evidence bagged, the boy in protective custody. The street was silent, the only witness to the night's horrors. I stood on the porch, rain-soaked and hollow, cradling the steel and mud scrapings that might never yield truth. I thought back to the boy's eyes, empty wells of fear, and the way he'd whispered into my uniform collar, "Don't let them take you too." I slid into my cruiser and idled, radio silent. The dashboard clock read 7:14. The morning shift would arrive soon. I'd give my report, file my notes. Unresolved, the heading would read, but I wouldn't be done. I placed my hand on the driver's door handle, feeling the residual tremor through the cold steel. Then I tapped the mud-caked toy car in my pocket. Its chipped paint a beacon of something lost. With a final glance at the house, I closed my eyes and whispered into the rain. "Not safe. Not safe." And I started the car, ready to chase questions that would never end. The dawn broke in pallid streaks across the horizon as I drove away from 412 Ruston Lane, the patrol horn silent in my mind. My cruiser's heater blew lukewarm air against my damp uniform, and I stared at the mud-caked toy car resting on the dash, its chipped red paint a mute witness to a nightmare without resolution. Behind me, the house lay sealed under yellow crime scene tape, surrounded by officers combing every inch of lawn and underbrush. But the real search was only beginning. Dispatch cleared me to return to headquarters. My preliminary report had to be filed, evidence logged, witness statements taken. I steered through the empty streets, headlights reflecting off puddles that shimmered like fractured glass. When I pulled into the station at 7:45, the day shift was arriving in droves, ambition and fresh coffee fueling their chatter. I parked and sat for a moment, gloved hand on the wheel, watching their ease. I envied them. To them, this was just another shift. To me, it was the epicenter of an unending terror. I stepped out, toy car in hand, and crossed the yard to the front desk. Officer Diaz looked up from her terminal. "Hayes, did you get any sleep?" she asked, brows knitting. I shook my head, voice hoarse. "No." I handed her the toy car and a clear evidence bag. This from the scene, logged under Exhibit A. She nodded and wrapped it, eyes flicking to the council meeting room where the sergeant was leading a briefing. Back in the bullpen, I brewed coffee as Johnson joined me. He yawned, rubbing his eyes. "Report's due in 40 minutes. How you feeling?" I inhaled the bitter steam. Not ready to write unresolved. He nodded, sliding onto the stool. "We'll add analysis, potential scenarios. We've got the boy's statement, but it's inconsistent." I frowned. The boy's words haunted me, echoing in my mind. "Don't let them take you too." Our briefing began under fluorescent glare. The sergeant clicked through slides. Timeline of events, evidence collected, OVIE footage from neighboring street cameras showing no vehicles arriving or departing, 4:12 from midnight to dawn. Slide 3. The boy's initial statement, rescued from the vent at 0020. No adult in sight, no trace of suspect. Slide 5. Subterranean crawlspace findings, human decomposition residue, no bodily remains. Slide 7. Unexplained crayon messages scratched into hidden vents and walls. The room was silent save for the hum of the projector. "That's it?" someone asked. "No suspects, no bodies, no motive." The sergeant's expression was tight. "I want all units running door-to-door canvass today. Neighbors may have seen or heard something after the rain stopped. Check traffic cameras for suspicious stops on side roads. Forensics. Expand analysis of the mud sample. K9. Research the vent network off-site. I want hypotheses by 10 o'clock. Hayes, you lead the canvass." I squared my shoulders. "Yes, Sarge." Within minutes, I was out the door again, notebook in hand, heading back to Ruston Lane, to houses I'd never needed to check for routine calls, now door to door with the face of a terrified boy burned into my memory. My first stop was Mrs. Crane 2 doors down, a retired teacher with keen hearing. She'd reported nothing but rain. I asked again about times between midnight and 1. She hesitated, then admitted, "I thought I heard. No, I can't be sure." Sounded like laughter? No, crying maybe. Her voice shook. I wrote it down. Next, Mr. Patel across the cul-de-sac. Ceramic figurines on his porch glistened in the morning light. He rattled off license plate numbers of cars he'd seen driving by earlier that night. None matched stolen vehicle logs. He saw a Chevy sedan idle for 15 seconds but didn't think it odd. I checked records. No report of an abandoned vehicle fitting that description. House to house, the pattern emerged. Darkness, rain, quiet. No footprints on lawns. No witnesses for the suspect. Only the boy's faint whimpers carried through walls. By midday, my feet ached, shoes heavy with dried mud. I returned to headquarters to consolidate notes. In the briefing room, forensics displayed preliminary results. The mud sample matched soil from the ravine behind 412, expected. But the iron-tinged residue tested presumptively positive for human blood. No DNA match to any known victims in national databases. The tiny scrap of flannel and the boy's torn shirt fragment both traced to local discount retailer. Common enough. The crayon scars on walls tested fresh, wax composition identical to a standard children's box. The sergeant nodded. We need to consider, was this a staged scenario? Who would go through such elaborate measures to trap a child and torment us? Someone offered a theory. A homeowner with mental illness, but medical records showed the family had no history. An ex-employee? No service calls or disputes in the ledger. Another offered that it could be some kind of vigilante crime, kidnappers playing God. But we had no ransom note, no message, no demand. We were out of plausible suspects. I felt a weight in my chest as the sergeant turned to me. Hayes, what's your gut? I closed my eyes, recalling the child's hollow stare in the vent, the scrawled words blinking in fluorescent light, the metallic whisper from the tunnel. Whatever it is, I said slowly, it's not random. Someone planned it, mapped out the vents, timed backups, cleared cameras. They knew police procedure. They wanted to be found. I paused. But they didn't want to be caught. A silence followed, uneasy and hollow. Then the sergeant nodded. Run down every contractor who serviced the house. HVAC, pest control, electricians. Anyone who had reason to open vents. Check their backgrounds. I want phone records for the household. Any calls placed around midnight. I jotted it down. Yes, Sarge. The rest of the afternoon dissolved into spreadsheets and phone calls. I tracked HVAC technicians, electrical inspectors, meter readers. None matched our profile. Phone records showed no incoming calls to the house after 10 p.m., only machines and telemarketers. The boys' phone recordings? 2 off-brand cell phones with only static and fragments of lullaby. Forensics sent the audio to sound engineers. Preliminary feedback. No voice prints, just ambient noise. By 1700 hours, the day shift was gone. The station hushed again under the weight of unanswered questions. I leaned against my desk, rubbing sore eyes, and glanced at an old photo taped to my cubicle. A younger me with my family at a barbecue, laughing. The contrast stung. On the opposite wall was the boy's drawing on a whiteboard. A house with 2 windows, the door open, and figures drawn in red marker, one small, one large. Beneath it, someone had scribbled, "Not safe." My phone buzzed. It was Johnson. Found something odd at evidence lockup. You should see this. I grabbed my coat. In the secure vault, he held a rectangular piece of duct panel we'd removed early that morning. I recognized the marks instantly, long scratches, as if pried open. He turned it over. On the back, etched faintly into the metal, were 2 sets of initials, C, H, and JH. I blinked. CH was my badge monogram, but what of JH? Johnson's. My heart lurched. The panel had been stored with other exhibits. Only forensics and I had handled it. Johnson's initials, his name, couldn't have been there naturally. I traced the scratches with my fingertip. They were too deep, too precise. Johnson watched me, brow furrowed. Your initials. Mine. No one else's. A cold dread settled in my gut. At first, I didn't want to believe he'd planted evidence. Memory flashed of him leaning over the vent grate at night the way he'd offered to take the boy to the medic once they found him. He'd been there, in the crawl space, signaling me to proceed. But why our initials? And why now, at this stage? I turned to the vault door, then back to Johnson. How long has this been here? I asked, voice low. He hesitated. Since we took it off, it never drew my attention until now. I nodded, summoning composure. We'll log it, but we need to consider every possibility. Accidental contamination or intentional. I want you off this case until we sort out the chain of custody. Johnson's face paled. "You think?" "I think we owe it to the boy to be sure." He opened his mouth, then closed it, swallowing hard. As I left the vault, I stared at the panel clutched in evidence bags in my hand. Outside, the station corridors were dim, officers packing up for the night. I felt eyes on me, unsure, questioning. I realized I was now a suspect in my own investigation. My badge number burned into a piece of tortured metal. Later, as I sat alone in my cruiser, night again, rain starting, my radio crackled, breaking the silence. "All units, be advised. Multi-agency task force tomorrow. Case elevation. Hayes suspended pending review." Suspended. The word echoed through my chest. The badge felt heavy on my hip. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the toy car, its chipped edges glinting. I traced a finger over its worn wheel, feeling once more the scraped metal of that panel. My world had shattered into fragments. A child's terror, a labyrinth of vents, evidence that pointed to me and my partner, and questions that dissolved into static. I pressed the toy to my ear and whispered back to the rain-soaked night. Here. Night had wrapped the county in a suffocating blanket by the time I slipped back behind the wheel of my cruiser. The city lights faded in my rearview mirror as I headed out toward the Pine Barrens, a stretch of woods I knew well, but tonight it felt alien, alive with unseen eyes. My suspension from duty still stung, but I couldn't shake the compulsion to keep going, to chase this horror to its end. I turned on to County Road 47, the same road that had carried me to Ruston Lane, and felt the weight of the toy car in my coat pocket like a heartbeat. Rain slicked the pavement, turning the lines into ghostly ribbons in my headlights. I slowed to 20 miles per hour, searching the shoulder for the ravine entrance where I'd first found those taunting footprints. I parked under a single flickering street lamp and stepped out, boots sinking into wet grass. The forest ahead loomed, its edges blurred by mist. I paused, listening. Only tree branches rattling like dry bones. Clipping my flashlight to my belt and grabbing my recorder, I approached the ravine's edge. The ground here dipped steeply, the slope softened by fallen leaves. I knelt and brushed away debris from the muddy depression. Still there, the shallow funnel where something heavy had been dragged. I pressed my gloved fingers into the mud and smelled the iron tang that had haunted my uniforms for days. I wiped the recorder microphone against my collar. Carter Hayes recording, time 23:17, returning to ravine. Evidence bag labeled B, 2 contains soil and blood residue. Footprints traced here under drizzle match juvenile patterns and disappear into wood. My voice trailed as I scanned the trees. Then I saw them. Faint impressions leading off to the east, toward a stand of knotty pines. Greenish moss pressed flat in odd shapes, like letters on a page. I holstered the recorder and stood, following the trail. The pines closed in, tight trunks forming a tunnel. My flashlight beam danced across gnarled roots, lifting slivers of bark. The air grew heavy, oppressive. Ahead, I spotted a dark form leaned against a tree. I froze. As I drew closer, the shape resolved into a small backpack, navy blue, identical to the one the boy had been wearing. Its zipper partially open, mud inside. I flicked on my recorder and tapped it once. "Found backpack," I whispered. "Contains blank notebook, crumpled pages waterlogged." I unzipped and pulled out the book, its cover stamped Ruston Elementary. I flipped through the soaked pages, no entries, just one hastily drawn sketch. The house facade at 412 Ruston Lane, windows black holes, front door cracked. Beneath it, a single word, smudged, "Come." My pulse ricocheted. I darted my light into the trees. a narrow animal path trammeled by dozens of small prints. I climbed in, branches clawing at my jacket. The farther I went, the denser the undergrowth, until the trail ended at a clearing ringed by pines. In the center lay a circle of stones, arranged like a crude altar. Rainwater pooled in hollows, reflecting my flashlight back like pale eyes. Atop the stones sat the boy's torn shirt, folded neatly. I knelt, voice barely steady. This isn't random. I lifted the shirt and noticed something tucked inside its collar. A single Polaroid photograph, its edges curled. I shook it dry and held it close to the light. The image showed me my cruiser at the Ruston Lane curb, stereo view, time-stamped earlier that night, and beside it, something I'd never recorded. A small silhouette of a child, crouched at the passenger window, head turned toward me. The face was obscured, but I recognized the flannel sleeve. My breath hitched. I flipped the Polaroid over. On the back, etched in razor-thin letters, "You will find me." Thunder rumbled overhead. I dropped the photo and rose, heart pounding. Something about the arrangement of stones felt deliberate, ritualistic. I circled them, shining the light over each rock. On one, carved so finely it could have been overlooked, was a single initial, H. I traced it, mind racing. Hale, Hayes, Harris. Every name I'd encountered carried an H, but there was something deeper. The letter matched the first initial of multiple clues: help, hear, hide. It was the key to the cipher I hadn't consciously seen. I whirled as a twig snapped behind me. I flicked my light toward the edge of the clearing, motion, darting behind a pine. "Hey!" I shouted, stepping forward. The beam landed on nothing but wet bark and dripping needles. My radio crackled unexpectedly. "S-47, do you read me?" It was dispatch, but garbled. I clicked the mic. "This is Hayes. What is your status?" Only static. I switched channels, empty frequencies. I was alone, deeper in the woods than radio reached. Rain slashed at my face. I gathered the Polaroid and notebook, stuffing them into evidence bags. I shivered and turned back toward the path, but the way was gone. Branches bridged overhead, leaves pressed so close they blocked the sky. The ground underfoot had shifted. There was no clear trail. Panic flickered. Then I clenched my jaw. I had the toys, the photos, the shirt, the notebook, every clue woven by someone who knew exactly how to lead me here. They wanted me to lose my bearings. I tried to retrace my steps. The stones were gone, the clearing empty except for soaking pines. My flashlight skittered over tree trunks. No moss impressions, no footprints. My recorder slipped from my pocket, hitting the ground with a soft thud. I bent to retrieve it. When I looked up, the pines stared down at me, motionless. I raised my light, chest tight. There, on the bark of the nearest tree, I saw it. Hayes. Scratched deep, letters ragged, my name, my badge number. The carving looked fresh, the sap dark around the edges. My breath stuck in my throat. I swiped at the letters with my glove. No doubt, I was marked. A violent gust rattled the pines above. My flashlight beam rattled. Then, unmistakably, a whisper curled through the branches. "Find me, find me." "Who are you?" I rasped, voice cracking. The air stiffened. The whisper repeated, softer now, directly behind me. "Hayes." I spun, heart hammering, but nothing moved. Just the trees and the rain. Something clanged metallic in the undergrowth. Toy wheels turning on gravel. I shone my light low. There, half buried in mud, lay the small toy car, only one wheel turned now. I picked it up, turning it over, etched on its base, ME. My legs trembled. I realized then, every time I thought I had cleansed the scene, sealed the vents, locked the crawl space, retrieved the boy, I had left behind the final calling card, something that whispered my name, that bore my initials, that beckoned me deeper. I had become part of the ritual, a branch cracked dead ahead. I raised my light, sweeping the beam. Between two pines, I saw a figure perched on a root, small, hunched, flannel sleeve visible. A child, face hidden by shadows. My voice trembled. "I've come. Where are you?" The figure rose, limbs thin and jerky, and tilted its head. Then it cocked a Polaroid camera, identical to the one I held evidence on, and snapped. The flash hissed like a breath. Blinded, I staggered back, the toy car dropping from my numb fingers. When my vision cleared, the figure was gone. In the eerie glow of my shaking flashlight, I watched as rain began to etch new letters into the bark beside where the child had stood. Wet sap dripped over them, blending with the rain, too late. I felt the forest shift, closing in around me. There was no exit but forward into deeper darkness. My recorder lay at my feet, capturing every sound. The drip of water, the rustle of needles, my ragged breathing. I bent to pick it up, but a whisper curled at my ear, so close I felt its breath. "I'm here, and so are they." I scrambled back to my cruiser, abandoning the evidence I'd fought to collect. The undergrowth tugged at my sleeves, as if grasping to hold me. I burst through the trees, lungs burning, and flung myself into the driver's seat. Heart pounding, I fumbled for my keys. The engine caught, headlights flaring alive. I tore down the muddy path, the dirt road whipping rain in my face. Behind me, the forest stood still. But in my side mirror, I saw movement. A small silhouette at the tree line, watching. Flannel sleeve visible, face hidden beneath dripping branches. It lifted a hand in a slow wave. My breath caught. I pressed my foot to the gas. The tires spun, mud flying. I didn't stop until the station lights broke through the night fog. I slammed on the brakes, heart hammering, and killed the engine. For a moment I sat there, chest heaving, fingers white on the steering wheel. Then, through the windshield, I saw my own reflection in the glass. Dark eyes rimmed with exhaustion, uniform plastered to my skin, the toy car's outline in my pocket. And behind that reflection, faint but unmistakable, a message scrawled across the glass in damp finger, letters forming one final truth. "You will never leave." I exhaled, a broken sound in the silence. The dashboard clock glowed 2:03. I reached for the radio. No channels, just static. I tossed the recorder and the toy car into the passenger seat, leaving them as trophies of a case that consumed me. My reflection stared back as I unbuckled my seatbelt and stepped into the station, rain dripping off my collar. I realized then that some calls don't end with answers, and some voices never stop echoing. As I crossed the threshold, my footsteps hollow on the tile, I heard once more that whisper in the dark. "Here." And I knew, with a certainty colder than the dawn, that I had already lost.